Well, there are a bunch of you watching me, so one of you should click. Jason Schweitzer!
What's up, man? How's it going?
Good. Shouldn't you be asleep?
Yeah, I probably can't stay long. I just thought I'd hop on here till someone else did. I just got through talking to Luke Johnston. Abigail was in there, and yeah, it was I just did a Zoom. I was gonna do a live stream, but then I just decided to do the Zoom. And Peter, I don't know if you know Peter yet, and my cousin John. So literally just ended that and saw this was going on, so I thought I'd pop over here. What are you up to?
Uh, I actually have a really bad headache, but
Oh no.
yeah, class. So class was over, and I was looking. I was yeah. So this class I was taking today was the last day of that class, and I was looking at what's going on Twitter and stuff, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to come into the office tomorrow, so I'm not going to be doing live streams or anything tomorrow. I have work and stuff, so I'm like, I'll do a live stream, see if people want to talk, and then yeah.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on being done with school, at least for the time.
Well, some of it, yeah. I mean, the ultimately, I'm actually. I mean, we'll see, but like, I probably should have just applied for the master's degree to begin with and stuff. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
What were you discussing?
Uh, gosh, it was all over. Well, we just were kind of. It was very spontaneous and then kind of sporadic, and so we just first we were just joking around, and then we started talking about cats and dogs, and then we were just kind of sharing stories. We were just talking about the difference between cat people and dog people, and then we were trying to draw in I don't know, just different ideas like why is as far as I know, historically cats have been worshipped more often than dogs have, but I could be wrong on that. I don't know if there's some like Norse mythology where they worship wolves or something. I don't really know, but see, it was about that.
No idea which
Yeah,
one has been worshipped more. But like the thing with cats is they're less servile, and so like it kind of makes sense that people would worship cats more than they would dogs. But what I love about dogs is they're just so happy to see you all the time. It's like they're so excited you're alive.
yeah,
And you know, for I generally hate mornings, but like when I wake up and dogs like just so happy I woke up. It's like, yay, you woke up, and it's like, well, at least somebody's happy I woke up.
yeah, yeah. They're just happy you exist. It's so nice. I'm definitely a dog person, but I'm more of a cat person now. I used to not like cats at all, but I like them now. I mean, my mom's got a nice cat, but definitely like dogs better. They
So I always liked the whole cats versus dogs, like, um being on team dog versus people who are on team cat, you know?
yeah.
And so I almost joined that late night stream you had the other night. I was done with work. What time are you done with work, Garth? And when are you starting that channel you're supposed to start?
You should hop in
Garth,
here. Get in here.
he's
This is
probably
a Garth.
pushing buttons at work. Garth listens to stuff at work. Garth
Oh,
has a lot of interesting, like he's a very insightful person, and so I try to signal boost Garth as much as I can, but like he rarely comes on. Um, Midnight CST. Uh, so when is that? Like in
Central
an
Standard Time. Yeah, and oh wait, no, it's 11 here, so it's 10 there, so probably 2 hours from now.
2 hours.
Yeah.
I thought you lived in Minnesota. Minnesota's central.
Who, me or him?
No, Garth. Garth.
Oh,
I
I think
met
it.
him in
Yeah, I think it
Minneapolis.
would be.
Okay.
I
So
think.
he's building this whole computer thing in order to, and it's like just start a channel. Although his video, like I told him to buy a camera because his camera was really bad.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people need to get some mics too. Most of the time, I can hear people okay, but oh yeah, I watched the Noahide video, and his mic was kind of hard to hear sometimes. That was a little, but
Oh,
uh,
Ryan. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Well, I mean, he's that was the first time he's ever been on something like this.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't have a mic. Like it's just I don't know why. Sometimes it's harder to understand people. I guess just the different computers or something, the built-in mics, or I don't know. But
Well, so Ryan, I believe he knows Korean, and like if he starts a Korean Noahide channel, that's like going to be really really popular. I think
it's
maybe.
a, so it'd be one of a kind, right? He'd have a
Yeah.
monopoly
Well,
on it.
it's weird. Like the Noahide channels aren't very big. Like even Tanakh Talk, which is the biggest Noahide channel, like I think it only has as many subscribers, and like everybody's heard of Rabbi Tovia Singer. Like even I think you've heard of him, but he well, first of all, he's far more popular among Christians than he is among Jews. Like Jews have not heard of Tovia Singer. That's the funny part. But yeah, even like I think a lot of people watch his channel, watch like Tanakh Talk, and never subscribe because like they can't bring themselves to subscribe to that channel. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, why would they? Well, you mean like so? Who would have a problem subscribing to it though? Like Christians or
Yeah, yeah.
really?
It's a very so that's the like it's not a very anti-Christian channel, but it's an obviously anti-Christian channel. It's like it's it, so it started with so Rabbi Singer started as an counter missionary, and
Okay.
that's how he became famous, was like refuting Christianity. And a lot of the people who watch that channel are there for refutations of Christianity. And even Rabbi Skobach, who's like not as like vociferously anti-Christianity as Rabbi Singer is, he actually he's been doing a series, he's been doing a commentary on the New Testament, and he's been doing it
That's
for like
interesting.
6 years every week.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's like I've listened to all of it. It's like 50 hours.
Is it good?
Yeah, I think it's great.
I would like to hear you do that. Actually, that'd be fun.
Well, Rabbi Skobach's done a much better one. I mean, I think kind like he goes through a lot of stuff. Max says a friend of mine attended Chabad while living in Seoul for military deployment. Says there's huge potential for a Noahide movement there. Yeah, I think so as
Wow.
well. It's okay. Christian apologetics are everywhere. It's part of the game. Yeah, that's the thing. So, Rabbi Skobach, I mean, yeah, it's really interesting stuff, and I highly recommend his commentary. He he's doing Revelations now. This week, like Revelation 6 came out.
Dang, that'd be
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
So he's basically he's just been going through. They just did Matthew, and then they skipped the other gospels, and then they're gonna go back because he thought it would be repetitive. So
Mhm.
they and he started doing the epistles and stuff, and he did Hebrews. I point a lot of people to his commentary on Hebrews.
I think you may have pointed me to that one. I think I did listen to that actually. I think I listened to that whole thing going on Hebrews.
I like Rabbi Skobach.
Yeah.
I agree with a lot of stuff that he says, and I think he's very insightful. I like him a little bit better than um, I like him a little bit better than Tovia Singer because I don't think he's as inflammatory. And Rabbi Malot, actually, he watches some of my streams, and he's on my Discord server, even though he doesn't do Discord very much. And his Parsha stuff on Tanakh Talk is really good. I've been linking that. I think I sent you his.
That I think you tagged me in a Discord, right? One of his things.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah.
so. That Rabbi Malot, his Parsha stuff. He actually like he prepares for it a lot, and
It
yeah.
sounded like it. Was that was the one with he was talking about Jacob and Esau and Leah and Rachel and
Right.
things like that.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, that was cool.
I saw that, and you love Jacob and Esau so much that I was like, okay, I have to
Yeah.
send this to Jason.
Yeah, it was
Rabbi
good.
Malak, I'm hoping. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of time, and I haven't really asked him to come on my channel. I think I kind of did. I didn't. I don't know. Um, yeah, he would be good. He would be good. But yeah, so he's one of the rabbis on Tanakh Talk, Rabbi Malak. That's where I found him.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, he should
so
get on
Tanakh
here.
Talk, he should. So Tanakh Talk is the biggest Noahide channel, and a lot, I would say a majority of the people there who watch it for kind of like refutation of Christianity.
Why is the so why is there like a weird animosity towards Christianity from the Noahide movement? Is it just because a lot of them have come out of Christianity and okay.
Almost all of them are ex-Christians,
Okay.
and a lot of them are were fundamentalist, and when they like left their church, a lot of them, they so there's a Facebook group they have, and it's basically a support network where like everybody's like, yeah, I think I'm a Noahide. I can't. I don't know how to tell my husband. I don't know how to tell my family. And like I just got kicked out of church, or I just lost my job, or I just because I don't believe in Jesus anymore. And so there's yeah, and a lot of the people. So, for example, um, there was somebody on there who is an artist, and he was painting. Hey, Chazi. He was painting murals at a Eastern Orthodox um, at an Eastern Orthodox church, and he posted that yeah, now he's a Noahide and he wouldn't take the job anymore, but like it's his job and he has a contract and he's just going to finish the contract, and he feels bad about it. It was basically like he was talking about because he was thinking it's idolatry and stuff like that. And a lot of the people in the Facebook group were like jumping down his throat, like it's it's idolatry. It's, how can you do this? Why are you giving up your life? Why are you giving up your afterlife for that? And they were really being, and it was completely inappropriate. It was completely inappropriate, and it's not like the rabbis were saying anything like that. And I told him, look, um, I actually think you should talk to a rabbi and ask. And frankly, I don't think he was doing anything. It's two-dimensional images in a Eastern Orthodox church where they believe in a monarchical trinity, and they I mean, I obviously I can't poskin. I'm not somebody who's qualified to poskin, make decisions in Jewish law, but um, and the Eastern Orthodox don't make icons of the Father and stuff. So, given all that, I don't see why, as a Noahide, he like what he was doing should be considered forbidden. And frankly, I think he could, if he asked an actual posek, a rabbinic dezizer, the rabbi would probably tell him it's fine, right? But a lot of the people, like, people were just jumping down his throat, and it's like, because Christianity is idolatry, and frankly, like, I can't imagine Rabbi Tovia Singer answering him the same way publicly as I think he would privately. Like, I'm pretty sure Rabbi Shulman, if he were to ask Rabbi Shulman privately what's called a shaila, a halachic question, I would be very, very surprised if Rabbi Shulman were to say to him, "You should like give up your livelihood and actually have to pay back the money from his hey Sam, pay back the money from his from this contract," right? Which would cause serious hardship in order not to finish painting some icon, like a mural at an Eastern Orthodox church. But like, also, I don't know any rabbis who would publicly like get involved in that discussion and be like, no, 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 it's fine. And I mean, I posted something saying you should ask a rabbi, and and people were like jumping down my throat, like, why, what does he need to ask a rabbi for? It's idolatry, and it's like, no, this is not how the halachic process works. And I mean, this was another thing. Like, there's this other Noahide channel, which she seems like a very, very nice person in Australia, and she has a Noahide channel, and she seems like an extremely nice person. Extremely nice person.
How nice?
And what?
How nice? I'm confused. How nice is this person?
Extremely nice person.
Just checking.
Yeah. But like, listening to her content, it seems that like she's gotten involved in some weirdly partisan, I would call it, like, within Orthodox Judaism, we have lots of, people call it flavors or streams or whatever, right? And you could call it kind of like denominations, but and maybe denomination would be correct, even though in the Jewish thing, like, Orthodox Judaism is supposedly its own denomination. And she doesn't really seem to know the halachic process very well. I emailed her, and I invited her to come to my on my channel, but I also kind of like, I'm guessing she probably won't, because she's become weirdly partisan, which is funny because she's become weirdly partisan with Chabad, which is where I'm partisan at. It's like if there's an Orthodox flavor that I am partisan towards, it's Chabad. And yeah, it's just sad seeing Noahides get sucked into like the things that I don't like about Orthodox Judaism. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I'm right there with you. All those things. It's Orthodox Judaism. All those things you don't like. I don't know what those are.
Well, the weird part, the partisanship, like
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who don't really understand the halachic process as well as the rabbis would like. And a lot of people think that just because you're an Orthodox Jew, you're and wearing the garb, you're necessarily like, there are plenty of Hasidim who like they're as uninformed about Orthodox Judaism as any pews going Christian who has no effing clue about the Trinity. But people expect like anybody who's dressed like a chassid to be like some learned rabbi, and plenty of them just are not at all. Anyway, Sam.
Sam,
Wants
it's nice
to
to
talk
meet
about-
you. I don't think I've ever really
Hey, Jason.
formally
Yeah,
met you before.
Nice to meet you too. I think I've seen you on, or at least seen your face on Twitter thumbnails of Jacob's live streams.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've kind of hit or miss. I've been around the Discord, but I don't interact with it too much anymore. But yeah, I've seen you on a lot of stuff though.
Jason is very, very, very knowledgeable about the Bible. Like he knows his Bible how I wish I knew my Bible.
Really? Oh man.
Yeah. No.
High compliment.
You actually know, like.
Don't put me up that high. Now I only got one. I can only go down from there. Know everything about the Bible. Oh my gosh.
Well, it's kind of funny because for me, like what I know about the Bible comes from kind of this map that Judaism gives you about the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And like the map is not the territory, right? And so a lot of times when I'm talking to you, Jason, I feel like I have a view from somebody who kind of like flew over it. Hey, Rabbi Malat is here. We were
There
just
he
talking
is. His ears are burning.
I feel like I have like I've been on the plane over all the territory that you like know really, really well.
Yeah.
And
well,
so,
I never even read it till about maybe 5 years ago now, and I don't read much, and so it's literally like the only thing I read, and I usually don't get to something else. Yeah,
and you don't read like secondary stuff on it. You just read the Bible.
Yeah, I don't usually. It's very rare I'll read a commentary or something. Though that being said, I have read almost all of George MacDonald's fantasy works now, because I found someone. Well, originally I think Sherry and Luke Thompson told me about him, and then Christian Golden on the Discord server told me to pick up one of his books, and I found one of his books at a used bookstore. It was fantastic, and so I've read that probably the first time, I think 2 years ago, and then I just kind of devoured his stuff. So the Bible, and Calvin and Hobbes, and that's about the extent of my reading. That's as far as it goes. What more do you need?
What more do you need? Yeah.
Yep.
So Sam, what do you want to talk about?
I don't know. I was just setting up StreamYard for me and Hank recording a video tomorrow, and was fiddling around with the tools, and I was about to log out, and then I noticed that you were in here, so I was like, oh, I can hop in here. So Hank and I are talking about the Council of Nicaea tomorrow. So
Ooh. You know how to use the brand tab and to create. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I made my own brand and my own texture, so I don't have your tetragrammatons all over the place. And so I found a good a good, rather dark painting of the Transfiguration to have in the background, which I thought was kind of a classy touch. So I'll do that. Hopefully the audio will be good. I'd been using Riverside, but I think Riverside has less good quality of audio recordings than Zoom for whatever reason. I feel like Zoom is actually decently good at whatever auto audio processing it does. And I was getting some complaints recently about my audio. I was like, oh, that's weird. Why am I getting complaints about my audio all of a sudden? It's like, oh, I switched to using a different platform. That's probably it. So I'm going to try StreamYard, see if it's better.
Yeah, actually, first of all, I do think it is. That's a really good suggestion. So Rabbi Malot, if you're listening, I don't know if you heard me talking about the Noahide who was he was hired to and it was like a multi-year contract to paint an Eastern Orthodox church with all the icons and stuff, right? And then he became a Noahide, and he posted a question online where he was feeling like guilty about finishing. He was finishing the contract, and like it was like he still had like 6 months to go, but he had been paid, and like he actually, I think he said he couldn't afford to even pay them back if he dropped the contract. And he felt guilty about it. And the thing is, it's two-dimensional painting, and the Eastern Orthodox believe in a monarchical trinity, which means it's very.
Well, what's the borderland between icon veneration and idolatry? I actually feel like this is an interesting question.
Well,
and it's a question that Protestants care about too.
Yeah, I would love to hear what Rabbi Malot has to say, but I like, as far as a psak din, what I told him was you should go talk to a rabbi who's Mora Hora, and I believe you are Rabbi Malot, so I'm hoping you can paskin on this. But for a Noahide, they're two-dimensional images. They're not three-dimensional images, and these are people who believe, like Eastern Orthodox believe in a monarchical trinity. So it is, I would say, as clearly Shituf as Shituf gets. And they don't believe in making icons of the Father, of God the Father. So like everything he was painting is not supposed to be God himself. And it seemed to me that, like, everything given, I didn't see that a rabbi would tell him that he should like drop the contract, stop working there, and then have to pay these people back money he didn't have. Like yeah. So Rabbi Malot says, I am not equipped to paskin on this, to be honest. My study in the laws of for Noahide is still in a very formative stage. I believe you are correct that there is what to rely on, but certainly not ideal. Okay, so
you shall not make for yourself a carved image.
Yeah, that's.
And do you know what the Greek word for image is? Icon.
Icon. Well, that's and the thing was, like, even if we're not talking about a Noahide, honestly, like, a Jew who was in such a situation and came and asked, like, do I, it seems to me like even for a Jewish Uman, like, yeah, better not, but I'm not sure that it would be considered, like, at best we're looking at Avak, Avodah Zarah. And I remember, so Rabbi Tauber, who's a posek here in Los Angeles, I remember there was a case where there was somebody who asked him a shaila who was an antiques dealer, and the antiques dealer had bought a bunch of stuff, and one of the things that he had bought was a 15th century chalice from a Catholic church that was used for communion. And so Rabbi Tauber's opinion was that it's like when it comes to Tashmishay Avodah Zarah, that it's not the idol itself. And that's when I had to explain to him transubstantiation, because he had never heard of that. And so like I explained and I'm like, well, the chalice itself, like supposedly it was including the blood of Jesus, right? And that to me seemed like more of a problem. And
so I asked the AI chatbot, according to Hasidic Judaism, can a Noahide participate in the carving of icons? According to Hasidic Judaism, the Noahide laws are a set of 7 moral laws that were given to God by Adam, given by God to Adam, and that were later reaffirmed to Noah after the flood. These laws are considered to be binding on all people, regardless of their religious beliefs. The Noahide laws include prohibitions against idolatry, murder, theft, sexual immorality, and blasphemy. Therefore, according to Hasidic Judaism, it would not be permissible for a Noahide to participate in the carving of idols or other religious images.
Well, he wasn't carving; he was painting. But okay, so this is what Rabbi Malot says. You're correct regarding that it is not a prohibition of creating a graven image. It's two-dimensional. But to encourage idolatry by enhancing a place of idol worship this way seems problematic. Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't say that it's lechatchila. But it seemed to me that even for a Jew, it might be something that is, that in that situation, Bedieved, he wouldn't necessarily be required, and like Hefsed Gadol, to be required to give up that job. You're correct that there are those who rule that for non-Jews, worshiping the Almighty together with a substitute deity may be permitted, in which case this can perhaps be excused. However, it's a very tenuous position, since according to many, this is a capital offense. Yeah. And
you guys are living up to the reputation of having 3 Jews and at least 4 or 5 opinions. So,
well, no, I mean, this is part of the problem when it comes to Noachides. Anyway, so Rabbi Tauber, ultimately, he said, no, nobody actually believes in transubstantiation, because if they really thought it was the blood of Jesus, they would never drink it. and so he allowed the chalice to be sold. And
people really do believe in transubstantiation. Well, that's the problem.
Well, I mean, that's the thing.
During the Middle Ages, people used to bring home the communion bread. They would like sneak it out of church to try and feed their sick cows, because they thought it would be able to miraculously heal their cows.
Okay, you have to understand that part of what Rabbi Tauber's thinking was, this was a chalice that was sold, and so that already removes it from a lot of the categories of things that Rabbi Malot is worried about here, which is that you're not encouraging ongoing idolatry, right? Yeah.
I have a question. Imagine.
Well, let me read what Rabbi Malot said. Not the painting of the ceiling, but the worship of even a hierarchical trinity. Go ahead.
So imagine I know a biblical Unitarian church plant that, because they are trying to do things on the cheap, is renting space from a synagogue I won't say where.
It's not going to be an Orthodox synagogue, that's for sure. Although
I'm not sure. I think it might be conservative, but not Orthodox.
Not Reform. Well, I mean, and this is Chicago.
It's not Chicago.
Oh, it's
Somewhere
not.
else.
Well, renting space to a Unitarian Christian, I'm not sure that's a problem. I don't know if that's a
So
problem.
I am giving a presentation to this same church on Saturday, which is not quite tomorrow, day after tomorrow, about the Eucharist. And so I wouldn't quite say I believe in transubstantiation, but I'm closer than many Protestants and sort of have an idea that it is in fact a sacrifice of Jesus to God, right? And so how would a Jewish synagogue feel about this happening on Sundays when they're not around
An
in their
Orthodox
building?
synagogue? Well, I mean, the
Speaking of
They're
weird borderland, the weird borderlands of Noahidism, this is, I also feel like, a weird.
yeah, like Rabbi Malot. I mean, he's not exactly a like thing on the Trinity like you are, but you guys are Unitarian.
It's Unitarian, right? We believe
It's
that this
Unitarian.
is a sacrificial worship, but it's definitely not a sacrificial worship of
You're
Jesus.
celebrating the sacrifice of a human being.
Correct. But
That's ugh.
but it's to God the Father. And we Unitarians are very clear on that one.
Sacrifice of a human being. Like that's like that's just. Have you read Isaiah?
I believe it or not, I have a couple times.
He has certain things to say about sacrificing human beings.
He has some other things to say that are also kind of interesting that Christians don't seem to mind. But it's sort of, that it's that thing that, Jesus, if it hadn't been commanded, we wouldn't do it, but therefore it's commanded, right? Sort of thing. That it was the thing that was specially reserved to be the unique last thing forever.
What seems to be most problematic to me is, like, even for a Gentile, like the celebration of human sacrifice, like towards God, that seems blasphemous, and that is one of the 7 Noahide laws.
So you and I have talked about this before, Jacob, that the crucifixion of Jesus is weird, right? Because it was a human sacrifice, but the people sacrificing him didn't do it with that intention, right? And it's sort of this weird backwards way, and the thing that they were doing for evil actually ended up being for good, but no one actually intended to sacrifice a human, but yet we celebrate it as a human sacrifice, right? It's sort of this weird.
We refer to people who are martyred as sacrifices,
right?
Okay. And that this is actually probably the discussion that I'm going to have with Father Stephen DeYoung when he gets a chance, is the idea that human beings who are martyred are in a sense like sacrifices is actually very integral to Judaism. And I keep on
the Maccabees, Book of Maccabees talks about that, right?
The 10 martyrs. I mean, like, the 10 martyrs, not in my liturgy, but in Rabbi Malot's liturgy and in the liturgy of the vast majority of Jews, is very central to the Day of Atonement, right? The idea that the 10 martyrs died as a sort of sacrifice and atonement for the Jewish people.
And right? I think that even one of the early churches in Antioch was a converted synagogue that I believe had some of the relics of some of the Maccabean martyrs.
I have a question about that. So the 10 martyrs related to the Day of Atonement. Hopefully this won't steer this in a weird direction. So they're kind of symbolic as the goat that the Lord's lot falls on, the goat that's offered up to God.
That's a good question. That's actually a good question. Rabbi Malat, we need you on here. But he says, looking up the halacha regarding the painting, seems like there's quite a bit of room to permit this. Yeah. And Chezi says, Rabbi Malat, I would recommend the book Ushmo Echad, which he's always which has a deep dive on this topic.
Which particular
Because some
topic? Are we
Rishonim
talking about
even-
icon carving or human sacrifice?
No. We're talking about yeah. Even opined that a Noahide is not forbidden, right? Because it may not be forbidden. So like he's not even. Is he being machshil? And again, is being machshil other people, like, is that even like a consideration by Noahides? Like, is a Noahide prohibited from it's the actual term is to place a stumbling stone before the blind. Like, that's prohibited to Jews. I don't know if it's prohibited to Gentiles to make even statues that are not worshipped but are only decorative. Yeah, and it's like the question of this conversation feels more like the Dungeons and Dragons of morality. Well, it's funny, but like halacha, like the halachic process is it's funny. Like Christians always talk about legalism, but because they don't engage in the halachic process like Judaism does, they end up becoming all kinds of weirdly legalistic in ways that are like that make me oftentimes go like, if only you guys weren't so anti-legalism, you wouldn't be so legalistic.
So what is the borderland between worship and veneration? So like these Maccabean martyrs, right? Presumably their bones were kept, and that this was a special relic, literally, and that some amount of praise and maybe even pilgrimage to their bone sites and stuff like that was
Well,
probably.
we still do pilgrimages to the graves of righteous people. That's something we do today as Jews.
Right, and that's not worship.
No.
Right.
And like, so for example, at the Rebbe's gravesite, people go on a regular basis. Hey Ryan, I made a siyum on a tractate of the Talmud at the Rebbe's gravesite and said Kaddish. Which, like, I mean, I think that's obviously like, and people go there and say prayers to God and ask for the intercession of the Rebbe and his father-in-law on their behalf.
Sounds interestingly familiar. A Catholic could be like, yeah, okay, we just make a picture of the person that we're calling on for intercession.
There are definitely pictures of the Rebbe that, yeah.
Like literal photographs or artistic renditions?
Both.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sure Rabbi Malat is not very comfortable with this because he comes from a tradition that is far more iconoclastic than the Hasidic tradition.
And Islam also has this struggle within it, right? Where some, especially more Shia, is definitely more comfortable with, making pilgrimages to the graves of important imams, praying for their intercession, and maybe even in some cases there's a picture of them. Although even the pro-intercessionary Muslims are probably more iconoclastic than Christians or Jews, but they also have that same tension where some people are against it, some people are in favor of it.
Yeah, I mean, within Judaism, I've actually heard people make that same exact comparison between what are called the Lithuanians. The Lithuanians are the non-Hasidic Orthodox Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Also not Sephardic, not from the East and Middle East. And so, yeah, there's three major liturgies in Judaism. There's Mizrahi, which is what I am. Then there's the Hasidic, and then there's what's called Ashkenaz or Lithuanian. And the Lithuanians, more than anybody, are very, very iconoclastic. And part of their discomfort with Hasidim, and I would say with also the Sephardic tradition, is the veneration of saints that that goes on in Hasidism.
And biblical Unitarians argue within themselves about whether or not we could pray to Jesus or only to the Father in the name of Jesus. And then some people ask if that's even really actually a distinction. But that is a recurring. Yeah.
This was the funny part. Like the first episode I made, Why is Protestant Theology So Bad? Mike Winger, was because he very obviously, like, he said you could go from Genesis to Revelation and never find a never find anybody praying to an angel or for intercession. And it's like, did he do that on purpose? Because Genesis 40, I believe it is, very clearly, like, Jacob is doing a sort of intercessory prayer, right? And yeah, I mean, ultimately praying. So this is why our prayers are oftentimes you, right? They're not, we say, blessed are you, right? We start a lot of our prayers actually talking to God in the second person, right? And certainly, like, you can't pray to a saint, you know, somebody who's considered a tzaddik, but you can, because especially among Hasidim and Sephardim, we say that tzaddikim b'mitatan nikraim chaim, that the righteous within, even in their death, are considered alive. Like, you could ask a righteous person to pray for you the same way as I can ask you to pray for me, right? And if it's precisely the same way as I would do it to a living person, then I don't think it's
and it's funny. So in my church, which took the "you should only pray to God in the name of Jesus" stance on this question, it was also relatively common in my church that we knew that some people were better at getting their prayers answered than other people, and seemingly had a special gift for healing or for being listened to. And so it was not uncommon for us in my own church to get the prayers of a couple of the people who were particularly good at being listened to by God. Right. So they were living people, right? And like, you would go up to them after church on Sunday and, hey, hey, Susie Q, could you please pray for my son, Sam? He's been feeling a little sick this past week. Oh yeah, sure. Let me do that. Right. So, right. We had the live version of intercession, but not the absent version of intercession. And Servetus's last words are, "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the eternal God, have mercy on me." Right, which is a prayer to Jesus.
Was this Garth's question? Who asked this question? So this is one of the places where I was reading the Christian Bible, and it made me think, okay, because these people don't know enough about Judaism, they're completely misunderstanding this. Because in Hebrew, to say something is in the name of, right, is to say it is with the intent, right? So, like, the whole meaning of it is just so different when you translate it to Hebrew that like the whole interpretation that Christians have of what it means to do something in the name of something is just so foreign to what it would mean if you were saying the same words in Hebrew that it's just an obvious mistranslation.
All right, so explain. Try and do your best to bridge. What would it mean to baptize people in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit?
Okay, so there's a very famous Talmudic saying, "Leolam Adam Yitzhak be Torah mitzvot l'shem shemayim, shemitoch lo lishma ba lishma." Always, a person should be involved in Torah and the commandments in the name of heaven, because from what is not in her name comes what is in her name.
Her being heaven?
Yes.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means a person should always do things with the wrong intent, because from having the wrong intent, they eventually will have the correct intent. Can't hear you, Jason.
Sorry, I said this reminds me of the George Costanza Seinfeld thing, where he purposely does the opposite of what he would do. So that way it always works out for his favor, because he realizes everything he does is always to his detriment. Maybe it's not.
By the way, hello, Craig. Nice having you.
Thanks for having me. I'm a friend of Jason's. He told me he was on here, and I joined it this hour against my better judgment. But thanks for having me.
Craig actually had a question for you that he wanted me to ask Tuesday, but I didn't see it till we were done. But
did I clarify the in the name of at all? So like, to do something in the name of something is to do it with an intent, right? And like, yeah,
the same thing that Jesus was doing.
Yeah. I mean, the whole idea that like, if you baptize, so like when you go to the mikvah, right, and you baptize yourself, right? People don't baptize each other. You just go and you toivel, right? Like, so having Lashem, right? Having in the name of, having intentions when you do that is actually a common thing people have, right? So they go and they baptize themselves in the name of, like, all kinds of things.
Like what?
Repentance, for example.
I'm baptizing myself in the name of repentance.
Yeah, like it's with the intention of, right? And so it's the whole idea of like, so Sherry says, so a prophet who speaks in the name of the Lord. I don't even know if that's equivalent.
Well, it does kind of mean with the authority of, right?
Yeah, it really, I mean, it's talking about intentions. And it just, it's a way of saying things, about talking about things, right?
You're allying yourself with the person who you're doing in the name of, right? Like when David is attacking Goliath, I'm fighting against you in the name of the Lord, right? It's sort of invoking his power, telling you the who's really boss and what you're doing it for and who you're doing it with.
Let's do more. So Genesis 40. Maybe I should pull up Genesis 40.
Jacob, is the thing that you're doing, you're acting in the name of, is it personified or can it be something inanimate?
Well, I mean, it's with the intention. We talk about in the name of heaven all the time, Lashem Shemayim, all the time. Like, yeah. Where was I? Genesis 40. So, where's the place where Jacob is blessing the sons of?
You're asking me.
Yes.
So I
Or
asked
it's
the
later on. It's past 40, I think. 40.
I asked the AI chatbot, in Orthodox Judaism, what does it mean to do something in the name of an entity? In Judaism, doing something in the name of an entity usually refers to carrying out an action or task in accordance with the principles and beliefs of that entity. This can involve performing a specific ritual or act of worship, or simply acting in a way that is consistent with the values and teachings of the entity in question. For example, a person might say they're doing something in the name of God if they're acting in a way that they believe is pleasing to God and in line with the teachings of the Jewish faith. So if you're baptizing someone in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, you're doing it in accordance and in alignment with all three of them.
So it's Genesis 48. So 48:16. Okay. So 48:16. The angel who redeemed me from all evil should bless the lads and let my name be called on them, together with the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac. Like, so this is actually like where we get like blessing people in the names of the fathers and like, you know, so like if instead of the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, it said in the name of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, like it would be so Jewish, it would like fit into the Jewish liturgy normally.
Mm-hmm. Because the book of Acts talks about people who baptized in the name of John the Baptist, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So like the idea that this is Trinitarian, it's just bad translation for people who don't know Hebrew.
Right. Like a president could take a vow in the name of the Constitution and George Washington and Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, like it's that type of thing. And it's like it makes no sense to me that like Christians think of this as some sort of slam dunk for the Trinity. Yeah. So Craig, you had a question you wanted to ask.
You know, this isn't the question, but I actually like your comment, Jason, about George Costanza. I heard a conversation between Rabbi David Wolpe, I believe is pronounced. Do you know this figure?
Yes.
Well, you.
That sneeze was on point with that.
Did I sneeze? Sorry, I thought I tried to mute myself, but then I was like already halfway into the sneeze, and I couldn't.
I would not go to my nephew's bar mitzvah if he had it, if she had it at his synagogue. Thank God he got kicked out of his synagogue, so he's gone now. But
so I don't know anything about the man. I was watching a conversation between him and someone named Eric Weinstein, and they made an interesting point. Or Eric was trying to make a point that Seinfeld was a brilliant way, you know, for a Jewish artist to kind of sublimate Jewish thematic ideas about purity culture and about, you know, deliberating about the rules of things. It was like just intensely and sublimely Jewish.
Yeah, well, I was not happy when Eric decided to have David Wolpe on, but like, yeah, I mean, this kind of. So one of the things that Yosef, I was glad Yosef agrees with me on, and frankly, I think everybody who really has learned Talmud. When you look in the Gospels, what was shocking to me was to find out um, how Talmudic Jesus was. Like, yes, the Talmud was finalized. The Babylonian Talmud was finalized like over 400 years after Jesus, but it's very, very obvious that Jesus was steeped in the Talmudic method. And it's so obvious, it was shocking to me, right? And similarly, it's like obvious that Paul of Tarsus was not. And like I asked Yosef, like, do you see this too? And he's like, yeah, I see it too. And I think a lot of people see it, which is like part of the funny thing that Christianity just never really got into that hermeneutics that, and I guess part of it is just because Paul does it so badly. It's yeah, it like Jesus is very, very Jewish, and that was the most surprising thing to me. Like, he's Jewish not as in, oh, he was born to a Jewish family. He's Jewish as in he's Jewish, right? Like, he's steeped in rabbinic culture. And when he speaks, like, once you get rid of what I call the crayon, right? It's like, is there a sect Jesus didn't interact with? Well, I mean, the part of the weird thing is, like, when you look at what the Gospels, like, there are parts in the Gospels where they obviously have the parties mixed up. So for example, the healing debate, like, we know what the healing debate between the Pharisees and the Sadducees was. And it's very clear who was on the side of healing on the Sabbath. The Pharisees. Like, the Sadducees thought it was what you call it? It was desecrating the Sabbath, and the Pharisees, like, we still to this day have in our liturgy like things talking about the importance of like desecrating the Sabbath to heal people, right? It was such an active debate before Jesus and even after Jesus that well, Chezi thinks, yeah, apparently Rabbi Emden adds Paul to the mix, and Father Stephen DeYoung is trying to convince me that like Paul is also misunderstood. I think Eisenman's arguments are better, but back to what I was saying.
Break down the crayon for us. I've never heard that before.
Say that again?
I said, break down the crayon for us. I've never heard that before.
Okay, so for example, I think it's Mark or Luke, right? It says, like, Jesus says, it is what comes out of your mouth, not what goes in it, that defiles you. And the crayon says, and in a lot of translations it has it in parentheses, and in so doing he made all foods clean. And it's like, yeah, no. Like,
is that an added commentary, I guess? Because I don't think I have that.
No. It's in the text itself in the Gospels.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it in one of the epistles or the actual gospel? Because
No,
I don't remember reading
gospel.
that. Huh. Oh, thus purifying all foods. That's what it is. Okay, yeah. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Whatever enters the body enters the stomach and is eliminated as purifying all foods. Okay. Yeah, I think that's Mark.
Mark 7:19. Right?
So this is dubious in your eyes.
Oh, it's obviously like, because when you take that out, when you take the crayon out, it's like what he's saying is no thank you, is non-controversial in Judaism at all. Like Jesus is saying something completely uncontroversial, which the crayon turns into something which is so completely abhorrent to Judaism that like it's if Jesus had actually said what the crayon says as opposed to what he did say, then I would be like, yeah, Jesus was a heretic. Case case closed. But it's the crayon, it's those additional things that are added all over the place into what Jesus says, which makes like, especially, and the Gospel of John is just full of it.
But that's interesting because I actually never read that as Jesus even saying that you could eat whatever you want or eat things that aren't kosher. I always thought that was just kind of a weird way of saying like your food goes through like almost the refiner's fire through the belly, like it's processed, and that's just what I always read it as. But
I mean, if you're actually paying attention to, I'm kind of happy you weren't listening, Rabbi Malott. You might have lost your temper with me, but the so obviously Peter, who in Acts has to have the vision to which even like that is controversial if it's like God actually telling him to eat not kosher food as opposed to symbolically telling him, you should fellowship, and that's what Father Stephen argues. Is Father Stephen will argue that even the one in Acts isn't saying that all foods are kosher, but I think Mark, the author of the Gospel of Mark, very obviously thought that Jesus was saying you can eat pig, and it's like, if he did that, okay, he would be a heretic, case over. We don't need to have any more discussion. But this was the surprising part to me, was when you actually read, and I'm not the first person to say this. So there was a Rabbi Soloveitchik, not one of the famous Soloveitchiks. He was actually a nephew of I believe Reb Chaim Brisker. I believe he was a nephew of, but he wrote a whole commentary in which he's like, yeah, the Christians have it all wrong. And it was printed, and supposedly it had an approbation from Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, which would be a very big deal. I would love to see that approbation if it exists. And other people have. So there have been commentaries of rabbis going through the Gospels and being like, okay, yeah, the Christians, like, this is what Jesus seems to be saying, and this is what so Chezi is actually going to go to the library where the only copy of this book exists. It's in Israel. But like, let me tell you about the Son of Man debate. I have a whole video on it, but let me tell you about it. So, have you heard of the Peshitta? The Peshitta is the first translation of the Greek Bible, the New Testament, to a different language than Greek. And it was a translation from the Greek to the Aramaic, which leads to the obvious question everybody asks: how do you know that it's a translation of the Greek as opposed to the Greek being a translation of the Aramaic? Right? Obvious question. Well, I actually, the approbation, so apparently there was a Rabbi Soloveitchik, not one of the famous ones, who wrote a book he called Kol Koreh, which is a commentary, like a rabbinic commentary on the Gospels, the Gospel of Matthew at least. And it's similar to Evan Bohan, which was another commentary that was actually by, I believe, a Rishon. on one of the Gospels, but that the commentary by Rabbi Tzvi Soloveitchik, I think his name was translated to many languages, and apparently the translation to German had a haskama from Rabbi Hirsch. Okay, back to the Peshitta. So I actually took a look at the Aramaic, right? And it was very, very obvious that in order to preserve the meaning that Christians give to the words of Jesus, they had to, like, at least for the word Son of Man, like, instead of just translating it Son of Man, like, there's one place, and I have it in my video, where they translated Bare Din Denasha, which the best translation I can give is his son of that there man. In order to prevent people from understanding what Jesus was saying in a non-Christian way, they had to completely translate it in a very, very strange way into Aramaic. And like when I first saw this, I was kind of like, dude, like, how could you do something like that? And I kind of got mad, but I eventually I settled on they must have thought that Jesus was speaking in Greek, and so they were trying to preserve what Jesus said by translating it in Aramaic in a very strange way. But at the same time, it's like the Aramaic is so forced, so absolutely forced in order to try to get Jesus to say the things that they're saying, that like it. So this is why I think Robert Eisenman is right. I think, and I don't know if I can recommend his book James, the Brother of Jesus, but it's been very, very influential. Despite the fact that Eisenman is not an influential academic, it's been influential because he's so convincing when he talks about the difference between Jewish Christianity and Greek Christianity. And Greek Christianity is just very, very not Jewish. And Jewish Christianity is so Jewish that honestly, like, and Rabbi Skobach said this. Rabbi Skobach said the Jewish community is going to have to, he believes very soon, and he said this several years ago, deal with having Jewish Christians who are actually Jewish. Because there has been enough of an attempt to revive, like, the Christianity as Jesus taught it, that like, and I said this to Father Stephen. I said, like, I don't know if you're an Orthodox Jew or an Orthodox Christian, and he's an Orthodox, he's an Eastern Orthodox priest, right? But the Christianity that he describes to me is more within the bounds of Orthodox Judaism than it is what vast majority of people would call Christianity. And that includes like all of the Catholics and all of the, and I actually think probably most of Eastern Orthodoxy as well. His conception of Christianity is more Jewish than anything I would have recognized as Christianity years ago.
So what are the features of that type of Christianity that make you say that? How would you compare it to the non-Jewish flavors?
Yeah, I considered making a video about this. First of all, it's not antinomian, meaning that it's not a Christianity that would tell a Jew that they should not circumcise their children. In fact, it's a Christianity that would tell Jews that they should continue to circumcise their children because of the way Father Stephen understands Acts 21. The way he understands it, no, Paul never preached that Jews should not circumcise their children, which is nothing that Christianity, like, if you were to say that 100 years ago, you would be a heretic in Christianity, right? So it's not antinomian. It's certainly not an egalitarian Trinity, and frankly, the idea of the Trinity that he talks about, like Bo Branson's description of an egalitarian Trinity, is so far closer to Jewish conceptions of God that I think vast majority of Christians don't recognize it at all.
Does antinomian refer also to those purity code and food code?
Well, no,
Moses
yeah,
law?
the food code. So Father Stephen would tell me that a Jewish Christian should not eat pork.
But so antinomian includes
that
as well.
in our understanding, right? If you're saying that the laws of Moses have been abridged, you're a heretic. Like if you're telling me that the laws of Moses are no longer inoperative, right? Then yeah, you're obviously outside of Judaism, right? It's not preterist, which is a term most Christians don't even know, which preterism is the idea that Jesus fulfilled the messianic prophecies, and frankly, like, and Christians get, like, don't believe me when I say this, there's not a single prophecy of the Messiah in the entirety of the Bible which you can claim Jesus uniquely fulfilled. And I'm not even sure I have to use the word uniquely, but like certainly uniquely, like there's not one single claim, right? So like the idea, so if you're going to tell me you believe Jesus will be the Messiah for some inscrutable reason, that's one thing. But like the idea that Jesus will be the Messiah is very, very different from the idea that Jesus is the Messiah, which a lot of Christians, they believe Jesus fulfilled the prophecies of the Messiah. And it's like, what are you talking about? It's like, what are you talking about? Which prophecy of the Messiah are you talking about? I called my son out of Egypt?
Well,
So Stevens would say he was not.
No. So Father Stephen certainly believes that Jesus is the Messiah, he would say, but he believes it in a not yet way, right? So he claims to be a Christian, and frankly, who am I to tell an Eastern Orthodox priest, and a very popular one at that, who teaches at Eastern Orthodox seminaries? It's not like he's like some fringe figure. He's an actual archpriest, right? So he's leveled up and taken a level in archpriest. But like ultimately, the Christianity that he describes is a very, very different Christianity than what Christianity has been for the past 2,000 years. And he's fine with that because he says, yeah, Christianity has not lived up to its promise for 2,000 years. And so, yeah.
Well, it's kind of strange to me. I always find it kind of strange because the things you're even talking about, I think I would agree with that. But I'm like, I mean, that's what I mean. What do I know? I just read the Bible. Like, it's like they don't sound absurd to me. Like, even when you're talking about Acts 21, I never got the impression that Paul said, don't, or told the Jews to not circumcise their children. I feel like he said, that in Galatians, don't let the Jews compel you. If you're a Gentile, don't let the Jews force you to be circumcised. But other than that, I don't think that's what I mean. All these things that I guess Christianity's, I guess you could say, maybe gone off the rails with or something the past 2,000 years. I mean, I wasn't even around 100 years ago, so I don't know. But I'm just saying from reading the Bible as a whole text, I've never really walked away with those impressions like you're giving off. Like,
this is what's called Paul within Judaism. It started with the new perspectives on Paul, and a lot of people started rereading their Christian Bible in a very different way. And like, for example, Paul circumcised Timothy, and who am I to tell Christians that they actually shouldn't reinterpret their religion so that it's actually back in Judaism? Like, I don't find the arguments of Paul within Judaism convincing. And I'm not the only one. Like, Paul within Judaism is a very, very controversial stance within Christianity. And there's a lot of people who think that, and they will accuse people like N.T. Wright of, like, because of the Holocaust, reinterpreting Christianity, and they will attack him as a heretic for his thing. And it's like, don't do me any favors. If you're going to reinterpret your religion, do it on your own dime. Don't do me the favor of reinterpreting Christianity because that in order to please the Jews, because there's plenty of Christians who will find that as plenty of reason to hate more Jews, right? And so wow, Grizz is awake. Who let Grizz on? It's pretty silly for a creator to insist you cut something off. Sounds more like something a pharaoh would do. This is
little tongue in cheek.
No, Grizz actually believes this. His views are. Good night. Yeah. I
was gonna add something. I can't remember now. Oh, but would you say, so with Paul though? Would you say he's kind of a half and half? Because to me, it would seem that way. Because he's like a mediator between Jewish and Gentile, right? And Greek.
I think Paul was a liar, and he lied to James's face, because he did preach precisely what Christianity has taught for 2,000 years, and he was just a charlatan. And I think when you read it like in context, Paul was teaching against what Jesus and the early Christian, the actual apostles, like, he was some Johnny come lately who claimed a vision from thing. And I don't go as far as Robert Eisenman does, but I think Eisenman's a lot closer than N.T. Wright to the truth. And Eisenman thinks that Paul was a Roman psyop to commandeer Christianity and turn it into what they wanted. And that's, he thinks that they were successful in that.
That's Eisenman?
That's Eisenman, yes.
And what would N.T. Wright say specifically pertaining to this issue?
N.T. Wright would say that Christians have misunderstood Paul for thousands of years, and that Paul never told any Jews not to circumcise their children, and would never do that.
I see.
I know nothing about you, Craig, so I don't know where you come from, like what your beliefs are here.
Well, You're not hurting my feelings.
Mitch says
I wouldn't. It wouldn't. It's not a huge thing if I did. Like, I'm pretty brazen, but like, please don't feel like you can't push back on anything I say, because it's my channel, because that's not the way my channel works. I've been
Well,
trying
I'm-
very hard to get Mitch to actually like push back.
Yeah, you gotta get him on the phone calls. I've hung up on Mitch before because we go at it sometimes.
Well,
He's great.
Jacob,
He's like,
I'm
he's like one
pretty-
of us.
I'm brazen as well, and so I will. We're really not in my jurisdiction here, so there's nothing you're saying that it's tempting me to make any reply. But I wonder if the Father Stevens position is one, to your sensibilities, that is a viable interpretation. Are you sympathetic to it?
I'm sympathetic to it in that I wish it were true. I'm not sympathetic in it that I believe that the arguments. I think it's Christians trying to reconcile Paul with Jesus, and I don't think Paul can be reconciled with Jesus because I think Paul was the one who taught everybody to go away from what Jesus taught, which, frankly, I think Jesus was just teaching Judaism.
That sounds controversial. I wonder why you say that.
Well, I mean, Jason often says when I describe Judaism, he's like, this sounds like Christianity to me.
A lot of it does, yeah. And when you talk about the 10 martyrs and the all of that stuff, and the mediators and everything like that. But sorry. Go ahead.
So, Craig, tell me, where do you go to church? What is your creed? Which denomination do you subscribe to?
Well, I don't. When I go to church, I go to Anglican church.
Okay.
But I don't subscribe to anything you could call Orthodox.
Okay. Are you a Trinitarian?
I suppose it depends on what you mean.
Okay. That's good enough. God, hopefully that's enough that you will escape eternal damnation.
Hey, I still call myself a Trinitarian, but I've explained that to you, and I don't know that it's
God
the same.
have mercy.
I don't know that Christians would call me a Trinitarian, though. But
So, Jacob,
Rabbi Malott wants to chime in here. I strongly disagree that Paul was teaching Judaism. Paul's views are directly opposed and contradictory to Judaism. And frankly, like a lot of the things that Paul says are so triggering. Like I have trouble reading the things that Paul says because they are so like abominable that like, yeah. And reading, so Romans 7, the end of it is actually some really nice stuff that like if it wasn't considered scripture, I would be like, hey, Paul sounds like somebody I could get along with. But like the beginning of Romans 7, the first half of the chapter was just so incredibly offensive. Like I'm not easily offended. He's trying to like do Talmudic logic, and it's just so bad that it was just offensive.
Yeah, see, that's interesting that I don't know that I would necessarily say
Rabbi Malott goes farther than I do.
Yeah,
Paul's writings or those attributed to him are outright anti-Semitic. From what scholars believe is authentic Paul, I'm not sure I would say that, but certainly there are things attributed to him, which I would. I think there are especially places in like Second Thessalonians and stuff which are like really bad. But
yes. Paul was Jewish, wasn't he? Like,
I actually don't think so. Chaim Maccabee doesn't think so. There are people who argue that there are. I mean, he may have claimed it. I personally, like, if you're asking me, like, what the preponderance of the evidence I've seen so far, I think he was just a charlatan that saw an opportunity and took it. to hijack Christianity into this movement, and I think he was a thief, and that's why, like, so 1 Corinthians 9 is like it. I think it exposes Paul as being one of the worst human beings in human history.
I do have a question. You have said before that Judaism does not seek to convert people. So in that way, why wouldn't it be wrong for Paul to have been teaching Judaism or been trying to make Jewish converts?
To make Jewish converts, right? So this
Yeah.
is the Paul within Judaism. This is the Paul within Judaism argument that Paul
Okay.
was talking to Gentiles, and in I think Jesus was crucified just like all the other rabbis who were murdered at the time. The Paul within Judaism argument is that Paul was teaching just like Judaism does, that you don't need to convert to Judaism or keep the laws. And like if you think Acts 15 is actually endorsing the Noahide laws, then like yeah, that is Judaism. Like that the Gentiles should keep the Noahide laws. And
Yeah.
there are particulars that actually Rabbi Malot, at some point I would love to talk to you about because of discussions I'm having with Father Stephen.
You
But,
should get both of them together, man. Get them in there. Would that be too controversial?
What about the
or would they be
writer
good?
of Hebrews? Would you consider that to be Paul, or?
No, I mean I don't think Hebrews is so bad I wouldn't even
It's
assign
a
it to Paul.
theological crime scene, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a theological crime scene. It really is.
I like Hebrews, but I don't know.
Paul claimed to be Jewish, and he may have been, but his supposed writings are filled with canards against the Jews. And not just that, I think he just fundamentally doesn't understand Judaism in ways that are shocking. Like, again, like this is Jacob's greatest hits, but like Philemon, like the fact he sends a slave back without even mentioning that it is explicitly prohibited to in the Torah to return an escaped slave, like that's just shocking to me. Like if you're going to give me an idea, if you're going to give me an argument that he for various reasons thought, but like he doesn't even mention it. Like, how do you not mention one of the 613? Like, it's one of the 613, and it's a very important one because it's like you should remember that you were slaves, right? Which is incredibly important. Which brings me back to my love for the Book of John, where he has Jews who say we were never slaves. Like, there is no heresy in Judaism beyond we were never slaves. Like, how a Jew could say we were never slaves, like we are the children of Abraham, we were never slaves. Like, what are you saying? Okay. I think this premise that Paul was teaching Noahidism specifically to non-Jews is easily debunked from within Paul's own writings or those attributed to him. I would agree with you, but if Christians want to believe that, more power to you. Like, I am all for Christians believing in Paul within Judaism, but please don't do it on the account that the Jews, like, what really bothers me is that there are, especially among the Ortho Bros and traditional Catholics and among some Protestants who are like, oh, people like N.T. Wright are just saying this type of stuff because of the Holocaust, and they want to make friends with the Jews. And it's like, you're not doing me any favors.
Well, I wanted to ask you, what's your view on Paul's discernment of the law and nobody being able to fulfill the law?
Yeah, so Bart Ehrman has a pretty good, and yes, I realize Bart Ehrman is an atheist, but Bart Ehrman has a chazis here.
Hello.
And he's decided not to be tznius again. Uh, the Bart Ehrman, like he says, Jews never particularly thought it was extremely difficult to keep the law, and this is something. So I invited John Van Donk and a friend of his to Simchat Torah um, at at my the Chabad house at my university, where I usually go to synagogue when I go to synagogue, if I go to synagogue, right? And he was just really, really shocked at the number of students who, in front of the rabbi, would take out their their telephones and like take pictures and stuff, and like he was expecting the rabbi to like be yelling at them like, how could you do this, you're going to hell, right? And it's like, no, like it's not like the rabbis don't know that most of the students drove to the synagogue. It's not like most Orthodox rabbis don't know there are people in their synagogues who drive to synagogue, even though, yes, it is forbidden. But it's not like we believe they're going to hell because they drove. Like, I mean, yes, there are people who would be throwing stones, but it's not like that's in the United States a common thing, right, Chazi?
Throwing stones in the United States or in Israel?
In
Are
the
you talking
United
about like? Are you talking about like fundamentalist like religious groups that throw stones on the
We don't
Shabbat?
have fundamentalists in Judaism. Like, yes, we have extreme, like we have people who are extreme who throw stones on Shabbat and at cars, right? But
Far and few between. You deal with that more specifically. You have some neighborhoods in Israel where you deal with that. Generally speaking, these are groups that are also um, very suspicious of the government in general, and the state of Israel. So they take the laws in Israel are more like a recommendation for them than like actually something that needs to be enforced. It's also very problematic in Israel specifically because the ultra Orthodox communities have a tremendous amount of political power, and just in general as a group. Just to give an example, it's very difficult um, to manage them. An example would be there was a book written by a rabbi that had a more lenient understanding for some.
please don't, please don't defend Slifkin on
No,
my
no,
channel.
no, 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 nothing to no, nothing to do with that. Just any book that they see as problematic. So they talk about getting it not letting anyone go into the bookstore, vandalizing the bookstore. So then the people complain. The police comes. The police comes. They flip the car and they burn it. And then the police says like, okay, we have a problem because there's optics right now. We can't send in policemen with knocking the heads of Jewish chassids because that basically looks like Germany again. So you end up in this issue where you really you have to go end up speaking to their rabbis to ask them to cool things down. So that is its own little problem, but I would say it's not the majority of religious Jews in Israel. I hope that answers your question, Jacob.
Chazi and Jacob, such a dynamic duo.
I do think though. Sorry, go ahead.
If I didn't have a rabid Zionist like Chazi around, I would have to hire one, because I think people need to see that there is definitely a lot of there's a lot of diversity in the Jewish community in terms of what we think, and I actually think this is part of the problem with the Noahide community in general, is like they don't recognize how much tolerance is actually within Judaism. They don't really understand it like they should. That ultimately, while I call Chazi and Yosef rabid Zionists, like I would never. It would be a sin for me to say that he is like his food isn't kosher, or that type of stuff, and people don't understand that.
Well, this is the famous line of Shammai and Hillel in the schools of thought, that they were vehemently against each other and contradicted each other and had completely different outlooks of how one should be sanctifying themselves in their life. However, the Talmud makes sure to mention that their daughters of both houses would still marry. And that's because they still managed to reconcile those differences because they saw themselves as part of a larger tribe. But Jacob, this also relates to something that Rabbi Mullah was talking about over here, which is, and obviously it's problematic, that rabbis don't talk about this, but is shituf, or how would you define that in English, Jacob? Did you use something before?
Well, it's partnership. I usually talk about the monarchical trinity. Before we go there, let me just read what Rabbi Malot said. You are describing extremist behavior that is disavowed by the mainstream Haredi Gadolim, Torah sages. Yes, of course, we're talking about very, very fringe people who would do such things.
Yes and no. By the way, Jacob, I just want to respond to that. That there could be a lot more stern voices from those communities, completely, forbidding that kind of attitude. Education in the schools, the parents themselves. So yes, it's fringe. In Israel, it's a very political and powerful fringe, and it creates a lot of strife in the country. So I'm not coming down on the whole community.
Rabbi Malat and I both went to Or Sameach, and when I was at Or Sameach, this is one of the things I talked to Rabbi Bullman about, who Rabbi Bullman was a very well recognized person. And frankly, I think that it was not being addressed properly, and Rabbi Bullman told me to butt out, basically. Great. And so, yeah, I was not exactly happy with that answer, despite how much reverence I still have for Rabbi Bullman. But it's a very difficult situation. I mean, this is where we're getting into the stuff where, like, it's internal Jewish stuff, like, which I don't like. But yeah, so
Christianity has all the same flaws. I mean,
this is what I keep on saying. No matter where you go, you're going to find out that wherever you go, the human being, the people there are all human beings, and that's very disappointing. And that especially disappoints you when you go to a religious community and you expect to find angels, and you end up finding that they're all human beings. But that's just the fact of it. Even in the very religious communities, you're dealing with human beings.
Well, the way I've viewed it is like, the way I view the church is it's like a place for sick people. You expect sinners to be sick people to be in a hospital. You expect sinners to be in a church. I mean, that's, yeah.
You can find angels in church. Angels anywhere. I think so. I mean, I don't think there's too much of a difference between the angel and the person. I mean, I think it's beautiful that people are people everywhere. It is disappointing in some ways, but I mean, go to church and go to any church, and if you find a kid, it's like, there you go, there's an angel. People call them angels all the time.
Jerry says, so if this is the case, why is Paul so controversial to you? It's very different when a human being is a human being.
I'm just kidding.
There's a huge difference between a human being and being a human being, which is what I expect, and a human being being vociferously defending what is the indefensible. That I can't stand. Like, look, I am not in any way a perfect person. Like, I am not even like, but at the very least, I'm willing to admit that my sins are my sins, right? If I were to walk around saying that it's perfectly fine that my business is open on the Sabbath, and that I drive on the Sabbath, and I do lots and lots of things which are prohibited by the Torah, like, it goes down to what the Rebbe said about mezuzahs, right? So when Jews walk past a mezuzah, we touch it and kiss it often. Like it's a very common thing to do. And parents will oftentimes like lift their kid up so the kid can also touch it, kiss it as he walks by. And so reform started in like schools, just putting the mezuzah down where the kid can reach it. And the Rebbe was like, no, you have that wrong. You teach the kid to reach up and understand that he can't reach the mezuzah, and that you need to, as opposed to lowering the mezuzah from where it should be. And that's what bothers me. But Paul admitted he was a sinner too. Fine. Then first of all, he shouldn't have been writing scripture, and I don't think he was. Like, I don't think even he thought he was writing scripture. And that's the funny thing. Like,
he did. I think he did.
I don't think he did. Go
I
ahead,
think
Fez.
Jacob.
Yeah.
I think he believed he did, at least.
Jacob, I was going to ask, and I don't know if Rabbi Malot is still here, but your conversation with Father DeYoung and the conversation that we're having over here, where do you see this going? And I'll put it in some context, because when I'm trying to see a macro picture of concepts like shituf, and then concepts of like, we see Jesus as potentially, at least we're talking about this, and you're talking about with Father DeYoung, as potentially coming from a more Jewish outlook. And then that sort of relates, I mentioned this thing that the church said in 2015, that the Vatican said that, Jews don't necessarily need to find salvation through Jesus. So as Christianity, or I mean, I know that the Vatican doesn't represent everyone, but as, let's say, the Vatican, quote unquote, lowers its requirement from Jews to sort of interact in that way, or find salvation in that way, alongside the readings in our Talmud and our Bible, where we could find a place where non-Jews can still worship God while worshiping other entities. Is there like a path forward you're trying to reach? Is it just to be an understanding, or is your attitude, no, like I want to try to create a safe space where we could be doing this together in a quote unquote kosher way?
Look, ultimately, for me, it is about God's kingdom on earth, which I think is described by the Tanakh and Torah. And so for me, I mean, I do believe in the rabbis and halacha. And so when somebody like Antonio, for example, or any of the other Noachites who come, and so were you here when I was describing the question that one Noachite had to Rabbi Malot?
I was here in spirit, and by spirit I mean I had one headphone on and I was walking my kids to school. But yes, I was there. I heard that.
So like that's a genuine shaila that somebody had, that there needs to be a psak din for. That's what interests me. I'm not interested in changing Judaism in order to make it more palatable to Christians. And I'm not even interested in changing Christianity to make it more palatable towards Jews. I believe that ultimately God runs the world. And I find myself in a situation where quite literally, like, there are Gentiles grabbing me by the tzitzis that I don't wear and saying, we've heard God is with you. We want to go with you. And it's like, this is straight out of Zechariah. It's like, what do I do with this? And so I'm not trying to bargain or negotiate or, in some way meet anybody halfway. This is Judaism as I see it.
Jason, what do you hear when you hear this conversation? Like you hear us throwing out things like, yeah, Jesus was this, Paul was that. Really, you could work together. Like, what does that sound like to you?
Well, I mean, I don't know, because I just like I was telling Jacob, I just basically, I grew up in church, but I don't think I ever soaked any of it in. So I just basically started reading my Bible about 5 years ago, and most of the things I hear Jacob say doesn't really seem that strange to me. It just sounds like the Bible. Like the fact that Jesus is a Jew, I'm like, that's
Right.
clearly in the Bible and all that sort of stuff. So I'm like, I never thought he wasn't. And then I mean, I would probably disagree with him in a lot of areas about Paul, I guess, but I mean, I will say that I don't think Paul necessarily reads as like Jewish text or anything. It reads almost more like Greek philosophy to me, or something like that, along those lines. But I would agree. I think I would kind of second where Jacob's at too. I think this is extremely interesting, where it's not really a blending or a synthesizing of the two, because it's not like like Jacob said, it's not really a give and take. It's just kind of, I mean, that's kind of what I'm doing the same way, as I'm wrestling with my own questions, and then I'm trying to come to the conversation and just bring how I see it. And so even when I talk about the Trinity, it's like I would say I affirm the Trinity, but I don't think I affirm it in the way that a Christian would normally describe it. I would affirm it more as like a pattern of reality, of a unity of multiplicity and things like that. And I could get into all that, but it's like it was not a Trinity I was taught growing up. Although I was never taught a Trinity growing up. I was just told it's a thing. Then you ask about it, and it's mysterious, and it's like, so it was. But then now, so like all these, even when the way I would describe the Trinity now, I don't think. I mean, I don't know. It might be rejected by Judaism still, but I just see it as the unity of multiplicity, where God is all in all, and it's. I mean
that
it doesn't
Sorry,
stop
go ahead.
at 3. Well, I was just gonna say it doesn't necessarily stop at 3. It like 3 is the smallest number you look at, but it's pulling two things into one, and it's uniting everything into one.
Yeah, I would be the more doctrinal person in this conversation. I guess a way in which I kind of see it I mean, I'm not entirely decided when it comes to eschatology, but the idea of eschatology can involve a coming together with the Jews during the end times, or it can involve a deceiving of the Jews at the end times, or it can involve quite a few different interpretations based on the way they see things going out. But as for what I'm listening to you say, that you don't believe, well, you don't have a concept of Jesus in terms of deity. Well, I mean, that was quite the debate for quite a few Christians for a very long time. I think there's enough scripture that points to Christ being quite unique amidst rabbis. Like, he's very uncommon compared to any preacher or prophet in the past, before him at least. And of course, I'm still learning your perspective as Jewish, because I'm still not quite learned on what you grasp on these things. But I've heard things of the whole Jesus seminar, and I've kind of heard bad things or so on. But it's I'm learning, and that's essentially what I'm doing. I think that's still a good thing.
I don't want to go off on the thing of monogenes, although I could, but I want to read what Rabbi Malott has been writing.
Please.
Meaning, even if I may do a thing, does that mean I should? Don't non-Jews deserve better than to be told? It's okay with me if you're worshiping falsehood. Rabbi Mendel Weinbach, our Rosh Yeshiva, we went to the same yeshiva in thing. Zatzal used to say something might be not be heresy, but still be wrong or stupid. So I'm all about respect and peace, and I won't shove my beliefs in people's faces, but I won't pretend I think Christianity is right or okay for non-Jews. I won't bother them, but I won't say it's good. I wish only the best for all mankind, Jew and non-Jew, and what we believe is true for everyone, even if our obligations are different. And that is how I view it as well. It's like I'm not going to say some things like, yes, I am going to say, you know what? I am much happier with Christians believing in a monarchical trinity than in an egalitarian trinity. But that is only because halachically I believe that it is less spiritually damaging, because when halacha says something is mutar as opposed to something is asur, right? That's spiritually less damaging to them. And that's why I would prefer for Christians to believe in a monarchical trinity. Not because I'm trying to be nice to them, but because, well, yeah, it is because I'm trying to be nice to them, but I'm trying to be nice to them in helping them not do something that is absolutely like idolatry for a non-Jew is just as spiritually damaging as it is for a Jew. So why shouldn't I hope that yes, people do start believing in a monarchical trinity?
I have a question, maybe tagging onto this, because I don't even know what the Jewish belief is when it comes to salvation and things like that. Because why would, if it's not quite the same as in Christianity, then why would even somebody, if they believed in a totally heretical Trinitarian concept, if they just, you could argue they were doing it in ignorance, and then why would they lose their...
Yeah, I mean, it is possible that they're doing it, and that's what the vast majority of rabbis would say, is they're doing it in ignorance. God will take care of it. We shouldn't get involved. We should just butt out, let them do whatever they want to do, right?
Well, where does the salvation? Is it just because is it not really a salvation issue? It's more of a kingdom on earth type issue, is what the...
Well, it's like God is going to take care of it. Like if you're praying to God and you're honest, and like most Jews would say, most rabbis would say, my problem is my relationship with God, and if I improve my relationship with God, then that's my problem. And so it was controversial within Judaism for Jews to evangelize other Jews. This was not something that was commonly done within Judaism 50 years ago. It really is an innovation of Chabad, I have to say. When the Rebbe first started encouraging people to put on phylacteries who were not religious, this was incredibly controversial, and basically every rabbi, every great rabbi, rabbinic leader outside of Chabad was very opposed to it. And that's just Jews proselytizing to other Jews, much less to Gentiles.
It's interesting you should say that. I'm culturally Christian, and my experience has been that in Christian communities, there's very little feeling that the Christian community has something to learn from other traditions. Would you say the same is true of your tradition?
Most rabbis would say we have nothing to learn. And frankly, I think there are problems with that. Rabbi Malot says, so why wouldn't I want a non-Jew to connect to God in the best way possible, not live in a permitted delusion? Ryan, who is a Noahide, says, and that is probably the best answer anyone will get to why Noahides exist. I agree. If you guys didn't watch listen to my discussion with Ryan. It's really good.
Hezzy's-
If I do say so myself.
Jacob, I would say, and I see what Rabbi Lot's writing over here, and I agree. Well, first of all, that's one of the questions. Is this a default mode? Like, right? Why tell my Christian or Muslim brother that, like, yeah, you know, I could contain you as far as worshiping God, but it's not really the real deal. First of all, I don't know if the text or the Bible even, and this is something we were discussing in the past, like in Micah, you have that though all people walk each in the names of their gods, we will walk in the name of our Lord, our God, forever and ever. And we have another one that says, and the many nations shall go. No, sorry, not that one. Yes, in Melachim, in Kings. Those nations worship the Lord, but they also serve their idols. To this day, their children and their children's children do as their ancestors did. And then the question is, at any point, is it supposed to be that we are all relating to God via the same frequency? Or is it not only is it okay, is it preferable that we are, while we're having these conversations, we also find that it's okay for us to have our own vessels of a relationship? And that relates to the concept of shituf. As in, is shituf okay as long as, and by okay means it's not ideal, or is it ideal for some? It's going to be more beneficial for them with the language that they have to relate to God their way and us to relate to God our way. And that doesn't mean we can't keep on having a conversation, but I don't know if it necessarily means that they're doing it in maybe they are doing, I don't want to say they're doing it in a lesser form, but it's not necessarily that we're supposed to, you know, convert them into having our understanding of what the relationship should be.
Okay, so ultimately, Chazi, this gets into a very deeply hashkafic, which is issue between you and me, and I would say Rabbi Malott, in when it comes, and hashkafa is how in Hebrew we discuss
Theological outlook.
flavors of Orthodox Judaism, right? And you are coming from an outlook of the halacha needs, the Jewish law needs to accommodate and update and look at things in different ways, and it's much more a revisionist way of looking at halacha than my view that, like, the Torah. What I don't believe that anything that I say is somehow new within Judaism.
Like the Rebbe having people put on phylacteries, was that not new?
No, I think it was.
What did the other rabbis think?
The other rabbis thought, yes, that it was, and
So,
I don't think they were right.
So I would say the same line. Like, and I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm just looking like Rabbi Bailot said that, you know, it's a tensious topic, right? So you have Rabbeinu Tam, the Malbim, Darchei Moshe, Baragola, the Shach, Yaakov Emden, Rav Tzvi Hirsch. There are many people that think that way. There's some that think other. Now, the question is, this is imperative when we have conversations like this, and definitely with someone that's in this space. So if one is looking at shituf as a default, that's very different than looking shituf as like, oh no, this is a total path forward for you to now live your life. You could still see, and again, I'm just to be clear, I don't know. These are ideas that we're playing with. I'm just saying that if there's room to, and it would be difficult because it would require someone to realize that Jesus is not being seen like the Father or the Holy Spirit, but seeing more as in a prophetic status. It would be a huge ask from Jews to come and see that, and it would be a huge ask for Christians to come and accept that. However, if something like that could happen, then you would start wondering, okay, so if I'm talking to Muslims, if I'm talking to Christians, that is the context I'm talking in, and you know, if you're looking for, again, not kumbaya, but path forward, that looks to me like a more viable path. And potentially it could be like, that's also just an interim. Then we need another 500 years of that. And then down the line, who knows what happens. But to me, that looks like a language of moving forward. And and then it behooves rabbis to then sort of deal with that and split between what is going to be controversial, what have I learned in the past, to okay, but what do the texts actually say? How can I reinterpret this, and how do I move forward with this? So I understand that it's coming from a quote unquote revisionary attitude, but my attitude in general is I'm not trying to invent new things. I'm just trying to dig deeper and expose new truths or old truths.
What is shituf?
Shituf would be worshiping God while worshiping other entities as well. And generally speaking,
entities.
The requirement would be that that as long as you recognize that there is God, or let's say the Father, or whether it's like Ra, there's the main God, and then there are other there are other entities over there that you are connecting to. So there's Ra, and there's also Osiris. Or I could be worshiping God, but also have a mediator like a Jesus, for example, where I see in that place. And as long as you don't, according to some rabbis, as long as you don't see that other entity as at the same level as God, but rather a part of it, then in theory that could be permissible. There's the Maimonides is against this, by the way.
Yeah, and
Rav Sadia Gaon and Anodab Yehuda. It's a split between Sephardim and Ashkenazim as well.
There is an argument within Judaism whether or not such a thing is allowable to Gentiles or not. And yeah, that's the question that internally we're debating. And if something is like not allowable even to Gentiles, then a lot of Jews are going to have to rethink how permissive we are. And the fact is, like, over the years, there wasn't a real point where Jews had an option of going to Gentiles and being like, no, you really shouldn't do this, right?
Yeah, what does permissive mean in this context? Because I don't have the impression that Jews are running around saying to Gentiles, you shouldn't.
So, okay. So this is the context in which it's been debated most, which is if I own a store, right? And you are a grocery store, right? And you're coming to my grocery store and you're buying food for your Christmas dinner, right? Or Easter dinner. And if it's truly an idolatrous event, then I, as a Jew, cannot. It's called placing a stumbling block before the blind. This is what it is prohibited in our religion to in any way cause you to do something which even for you is not at all permitted. And part of the reason that there has been, I would say, the difference of opinion is the Sephardic rabbis who were in Muslim lands, right, didn't really have to think about if it's a problem or not. Whereas the
Correct.
Ashkenazi rabbis who were in Christian lands were like, okay, the Christians they're not doing something that's so bad that we can't even deal with them, that we have an obligation to like not be involved at all.
That's really interesting. You know what's catching my attention is, almost before you can have any conversation between the groups, there's this building of a dictionary or building a translation between the dictionaries that's necessary, because otherwise I don't even know, we don't even know what we're talking about when each group uses their special idioms.
Yeah. And Rabbi Malot really comes down on the thing that like we shouldn't go around saying that it's shituf is permissible to Gentiles. He doesn't think that
What
it's
does he say, Jacob? And I say this respectfully. He says it's not clear. It's not easy to understand. This is always the topic, right? This is always the question, which is, yeah, listen, some say it, some don't. At some point, people need to make moves. People need to make decisions. I'm not that person, and I don't know if Malot's that person. But saying yes, it's debated. Okay, and that's a debate that could keep on happening. Now you could come and say, okay, but I'm quoting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. That's not good enough. And this goes all the way back to as far as within the Jewish community, and I also say this maybe in the Christian community as well. What does it look like? Who does it? I'll ask Jason, for example. Who is the authority you need to see to tell you something to change your mind? Like someone comes and tell you, you know what, Jesus meant X, which is very controversial. Who would it need to look like? How would that person need to look like for you to be like, okay, I'm going to take you at your word? Because, and as far as in our tradition, they're like, I'm quoting some names over here that let's say are considered heavy hitters, that people will go according to them for other things. But when it comes to more controversial topics, they'll be like, well, that's what he said here. I don't know if I never have to accept him. And you have to put that into the context of 2,000 years of exile, pogroms, our own needs to self-define ourselves, to protect ourselves. So you have layers of things that even if there's some truth to like a more pluralistic vision, it's very difficult to dig down and get there because you have to deal with all the politics around that. And again, that's why I think these conversations are fantastic, because it allows you to sift through that. However, Rabbi Malot's attitude, which I understand, is an attitude that I think needs moving forward. Like I would say, Rabbi Malot, if you're not sure, then dig deep. Look, see, read, find, see, make a decision, go ask different rabbis, challenge them. Because to me, if it results in a better understanding and potentially gives you a path forward, that's what we should be running on. And I should just clarify, the attitude that the rabbi is saying over here, and by attitude, I don't mean any like a bad attitude. It's just like what he's describing over here, how he's articulating himself. This is the same attitude that we have towards if a divorced woman, the husband won't give her divorce deed, she's still considered married, and you have women in Judaism that are stuck in this state for 20 years. And this is because there's different opinions, we're not sure, we don't know how to move forward. So this is true about in Judaism, it's theology and many other aspects, that we are still very much with a exile mentality, with a 2,000-year exoskeleton that we are terrified to shed, because shedding it means that Judaism ultimately starts looking different, like it has. Like Judaism looks different now than it did at the time of the Talmud, like it looks different like at the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, like it looks different from the attitude and relationship that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had as well.
Okay, so this is a place where you're, with me at least, you're preaching to the choir, and I think you're actually with Rabbi Malot preaching to the choir as well. I think all of us wish people had had broader shoulders, and it's honestly the people who are least schooled in Judaism who end up getting up in arms and getting mad at rabbis for allowing things. For example, Rav Ovadia Yosef telling Ashkenazim they're allowed to eat kidneyot on Passover. And if Rav Ovadia Yosef can't say it, I don't know who can. And yeah, I mean, honestly, Rabbi Malot, you have to jump on, because it's like really hard to get into.
I feel like this is getting controversial with the chat over
It
here.
is. Yeah.
You're not going to tell me.
But one thing I was going to ask, so if you, like Rabbi Malot, if he's telling me that, if he wants to tell me that I'm, instead of leaving me in a delusion and worshiping Christ or whatever, but then he's trying to convert me, like in telling me that he's trying to sway me to his side, which I think is right. Like I do think that should happen, but I'm just saying that is happening, right? But you are trying. If that doesn't happen, then there's no further up and further in, and there's no drawing towards something like theosis, right? So I don't think these things are wrong, but look what you started, Jason. But But I mean, I'm just saying, like that is ultimately what's happening, right? In these conversations, there is a push and pull that's happening, and
Jason,
I mean,
we've lost your video. Could you restart, because it would
Yeah, we
be
can
really
hear you just fine. But
oh,
yeah, we
okay.
hear you fine, but like
You can't
yeah,
see me at all.
you
Well,
can
it started.
refresh. Yeah.
It started raining here, so I might be done. But
But
Just restart your camera, Jason.
okay,
I just want to say, Rabbi Malot, like it says over here, there was like an ad hominem attack. I'm not exactly sure where there was any attack on anyone specific over here. My attack was towards the rabbinical attitude in general. I understand that the rabbi says like this is the Torah mentality. First of all, again, this is a much larger conversation, but I have issues with that mentality as well, and it's a broader conversation. But again, there was nothing personal against your Rabbi Malot. I think it's fantastic that you're in the conversation. I think the things that you're saying with 99% we agree on. So it's more a frustration of mine, not with just with the attitude that you know, it's writing that these things are hard to understand, they're complicated. At some point, they need to be addressed. And like, even if you go to a shiur with a rabbi, a class, and he gives you, even if you ask him and challenge him, that many times the attitude is, yeah, listen, it's complicated. We don't have to go in there. That's what I'm saying. We need to go in there. So I'm totally fine coming out with the attitude that, you know what, you showed me everything I needed to see, and you're 100% right, and I was wrong. That's totally fine. I have no agenda. My attitude, we can't say, listen, it's problematic, so we just put our hands up in the air and just wait for another 100 years from now.
okay, I mean, if you want to throw out our history because it happened in exile, you are throwing out Judaism. And
what does Rav Kook? Rav Kook calls the
well, Chezi, I don't think Chezi wants to throw out the Masorah, but let's face it, this is a huge hashkafic issue between the Zionists and mainstream Judaism.
mainstream Judaism. You mean not the Jews living in the Promised Land?
I vast majority of Orthodox Jews are non-Zionists, Chezi, and you know it.
You mean not Zionist the way like the political movement Zionist, not Zionist like we all say, let's return to Zion.
Atchalta the Geula, the heresy that you and way too many people.
What are you talking about? The beginning of the redemption is exactly why we're having this conversation. It's indicative of that.
No. See, this is where you become very, very heretical, and I understand what Rabbi Malot is saying. This is this Zionistic belief that we're at the redemption, and it's like
no, we're not at the redemption. I'm saying these are the breadcrumbs of the redemption. Conversations like this. I mean, I just said it's after.
Different from what was happening 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago.
You mean Jews, Muslims, and Christians killing each other? Jews being having no political power, no army power, completely dispersed. Now they have something called a Knesset, a body, Now you're right that
1,783 years. The entirety of the world has been moving towards the coming of the Messiah. This is not new.
Okay, so what's the problem?
So
you're right.
So
we're there. So I would think a data point would be coming to Israel.
You were saying, Chezi, the problem is what you were saying about the exile ideas and exile, right? We're still in exile, Chezi. We're still
Okay, so that's an attitude. I'm quoting again. I know you don't like him. The Talmud itself and the closing of the Talmud, none of these are these are all default modes, right? The God didn't come and say, you know, it's going to be great that then you guys are going to split between Babylon and Jerusalem. You guys are going to write two different versions. These are all defaults. We don't need, there's rules how to engage these things, but this is a large band-aid of the exile. It behooves us, and I'm not the guy, and that's the big problem, which people can't identify that person. But the Torah is not supposed to stay the way it was in exile. That's just not what it's supposed to look like. That's it. I mean, I don't have to be so controversial. Maimonides eventually says, right, no more sacrifices, right? Now, the temple hasn't been built, but clearly there's a difference between what was and what will be. And now we're in the middle ground where I'm not even saying let's jump to what will be, but you have to have a conversation, which is recognize it won't be what you were used to. And it doesn't mean people are not praying anymore. And it doesn't mean that people aren't putting on phylacteries anymore, but there are going to be changes. And if our attitude is like, yeah, well, let the sages discuss the changes. Who are they? Where are they?
This is not peak dialogos, and no, this is not a very new conversation. This is the same conversation that we've been having with the Zionists for 80 years now. And
So, just as an uninitiated person, is the controversial thing here that Hezi's saying, is this that the Torah can't stay the way it was in exile?
yes,
Well, there has to be a conclusion to there. It has to come together. I mean, there has to be salvation, and the Messiah needs to be realized. Yeah.
Rabbi Malot says the world looks very different now than it did 100 years ago, where 100 years ago looks much more like 1,000 years ago. There's definitely something special happening, and it's happening rapidly. Yes.
So don't be on the sidelines.
Oh, I'm going to post this one because it's just I have to. I'm sorry.
Rabbi Malot says, I do label myself Zionist or non-Zionist for the record, and I'm not at odds with Zionists per se. I am very at odds with Zionists per se.
So
and
can you break this down for me a little clearer, the Zionist, non-Zionist thing?
there is an idea that some people have that because now there are so many Jews living in Israel, that because of the state of Israel, that somehow eschatologically there has
only
been
God. I'm sorry.
Theologically in Judaism, which I reject completely.
Somehow, what was that last part you said? I missed it. Somehow eschatologically.
There has been a shift
Okay.
that is theological because now there are people that, especially whether or not we are still in the exile, like I think we are as every bit as much in the exile as we were 100 years ago, whereas there are lots of people who are saying Hallel, Rahman al-Islam, on Yom HaAtzamot to celebrate.
I'm saying, but these are we're mixing up two different things for a second. I'm putting aside the Zionistic political movement. Okay, I'm talking about just something called Atchalta de Geulta, which is the beginning of redemption. This is something that you also find inside the Talmud. And I'm asking you, Jacob, you're coming saying, listen, Chazi, I'm having this conversation and Gentiles are holding on to my fringes, right? Like you're saying, this is what I feel.
I told you, I was the one who was crossing out Atchalta de Geula with a pen.
I know. Okay. However, that being said, if you are feeling inspired by the fact that these conversations are happening and you see them as, and like Rabbi Malot saying, it's like something's happening rapidly, right? So I look at the data points, the world recognizing the country for the Israel as a country for the Jews. We have more Torah being learned here than ever before. You have a place where you could recognize and have to try to embody your actual laws into the government, not successfully, but into a body politic throughout the people. You have old people and young children playing together in the gardens, just like the prophet said. So to me, at the same vein, these all seem to me very very pertinent data points that indicate at least the beginning of the redemption. Okay, and I don't know what redemption means. I don't know, and I'm not saying that now if people that don't move to Israel, they're living a lie. I'm not saying any of that. My point is that there's clearly something happening over here, and I connect that to 1965 with the Vatican's attitude then, 2015 with the Vatican attitudes then, the Abraham Accords. All these are all, to someone 1,000 years ago, you would say, listen, there's going to be a place called Israel. There's going to have a Knesset that represents the old Knesset. There's going to be peace with Arab countries. people will tell you that's what the end days look like. That's what the Messianic time looks like. So I don't think we're there, but we're clearly no longer in exile because. Sorry, go ahead. That would be my attitude.
So you're not necessarily talking about like a political movement then. It's more of a like a theological shift.
Yes, there is a political movement. There is a political movement, and it has its own issues. It has its own political issues. There's its own legal issues. So I'm moving that aside. Not that movement, but I'm talking about Jews constantly wanting to return here, praying 3 times a day that they'll be able to return here. Now you could be like, it's not the time yet. And my attitude is correct. It's not the time yet. You guys are all welcome to come over here and make it that time. If you build it, they will come. So people come and say like, yeah, but there's rabid Zionists. I'm not talking about you, Jacob. Over there in the government, they're doing nonsense. Great. Come over here, make a political power, get into government.
Just to make myself clear for Rabbi Malot, and you guys probably won't understand this, I was very, very involved in the anti-Zionist movement. Satmar, Al Hagola Val Hatmura, and Vayol Moshe. And if anybody wants to learn Ma'aneh Chacham by Rabbi Yol, describing where he says exactly as the Rebbe did, as the primary student of the Rebbe, that Chabad is even more anti-Zionistic than Satmar, and I believe it is. There's a reason I don't call myself an anti-Zionist. It's because of the anti-Semitism, and that's why we've started calling ourselves non-Zionist. But when it comes down to it, yes, I am. It is false messianism, which I stand against as much as I stand against any other type of false messianism.
Oh man, he left. I wanted to riff on what he was saying. Dang it.
He has to go to work. I mean,
what a loser. I know. I gotta go to bed. It's like 1:30 here. My goodness. No, but I was wondering about the exile thing, because the exile. I mean, wouldn't that work fractally? That's what I was about to ask him. I couldn't get to it, but because I mean, it works all the way out to Adam. Adam got exiled from the garden. So if that's what he's talking about, it's a flow, like everything's turning back that way, right? It's drawing all back to the one center, which would be something like Jerusalem, both spiritually and probably materially as well. And it would be this
I'll let Chazi
all
speak.
Humanity.
You'll let Chazi what? I was disconnected for a second. What are you gonna let me do?
I said I'll let Chazi speak because I did enough speaking.
Well,
Jason, say your question again.
Are you sure you wanted to say something too, Craig?
No, you.
I was going to ask you, Hezi, because you were talking about it more of a spiritual thing first, a spiritual redemption type thing. And I'm saying I do think that works with the physical, where people would look back towards Jerusalem. But does it work fractally? Because when you mentioned exile, it just made me think of Adam in the garden. Like all humanity was exiled from this place with God, and so it's kind of what's happening now is something like he's drawing back to this one center, which is something like a heavenly Jerusalem, a spiritual Jerusalem, which would also be probably a physical. I mean, I don't know why it wouldn't be.
I'm thinking physical Jerusalem. So I mentioned this to Jacob in the past, but you guys all know this guy named Jordan Peterson, and he was recently in Israel, and at the end he goes around saying, this beautiful speech, how the world is looking to Israel, to Jerusalem, how the face of the world is resting on our shoulders. Now, why is he saying that? Like, he's not saying that in his Spain tour, or his Italy tour, or his Russia tour, right? That's a conversation he's having there. Now, I think it could be both physical and spiritual, but my attitude is definitely towards the physical, where you have, let not the foreigner say, who has attached himself to the Lord will keep me apart from his people. And let not the Enoch say, I am withered tree. The attitude is that the Gentile is supposed to find his place and not feel different and be accepted by God. There's different revelations in Ezekiel where the Gentile is not invited into the temple, but there are many where they are brought into the temple. For example, Zephaniah, for then I will make the peoples pure of speech. They will invoke the Lord by name and serve him with one accord. These are all prophecies which have a much more pluralistic understanding. It doesn't mean, and I say this as a Jew, I still find our place to be as a priestly class, which means we are there to, and this is not to sound, I hope this doesn't come off wrong,
Don't worry.
Just
But
say
to
it. I don't get offended very easily at all.
to educate, orient, and this also relates to the idea of shituf. We as Jews have been practicing, let's say, this direct frequency with God for a very long time, and have a whole theology and philosophy and code built around it. And while other religions, and while I find a place for other religions, as I see them divinely inspired and potentially have their own divine spark in them, like, well, even the Eastern religions, but Christianity and Islam, however, they are, our job as Jews is to orient them into a proper orientation of practice towards God. And I believe that also what happens in the temple. And in the temple, that doesn't mean they come and then live as Jews. It means they come to the temple, they learn from our ways. Imagine they open up this beautiful library and say, like, okay, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take that. I've been doing this wrong. But it would also be on the rabbi's attitude to be like, okay, come to me for a second. Explain to me a little about what you're talking about nirvana. Okay, I get that. That is amazing. There is truth to that. And you did get to those certain levels, that the connection. However, far and few between people could do that throughout their whole lifetime. In Judaism, you have a concept called Shabbos, which already puts you in a weekly nirvana due to its own version of technologies. So are you interested in learning some of these technologies and doing so? Because you'd be able to benefit from that. And you are welcome to now go back to your ashram and wear your garbs. You don't have to necessarily now dress like me. However, I reoriented you in that sense. And when you come back to the temple, we are all doing that together. So that to me is a more sought after vision. That doesn't mean Jews become Christians, and it does require Christians, and at least as far as Judaism is concerned, it does require a frame shift from Christians and Muslims and from the Eastern religions. However, I don't think it needs to be necessarily violent, even conceptually, and I also understand the Rabbi Malad is saying, like, yes, like sages have been trying to deal with these issues for many years. However, it's complicated, and there potentially was the time that there was the wrong time to have this discussion. Right? We stopped. As far as Judaism, like there was an attitude about translating the Bible into Greek, and then we got rid of that because of the political issues that we had with that. Now might be the time to revamp our translations.
You know, I wonder if you think this is related. This subject of Zionism seems to me related to an issue that happens that the Christians deal with, which is that you have this unanswered question: how does the tradition update itself in response to changes in culture?
Serious questions you're asking here.
Well,
Look,
right,
no.
and so
I have to say, look, no, I
Wait,
actually,
Jacob, let him just finish this thought for a second. I want to make sure we don't misunderstand what he was saying. Yeah, go ahead, dude.
well, I'll be brief, but you know, you have some people say in response to things, let's say culture issues like slavery, you know, a couple hundred years ago, things like, you know, voting rights for women, things like same-sex marriage, because these are not, you know, on the face of it, traditionally it seemed obvious. Now it seems less obvious to people. And so the question is, do you just have a really stiff backbone and say it says what it says and that's it? Or do you say, oh, it was in there the whole time that same-sex marriage is allowed? You know, how do you deal with these things? And I'll end it there.
Jacob,
okay. So
I have a response, but go ahead.
So the thing is, within Judaism, we don't have fundamentalists. We don't have, and part of the halachic process is to update with things and update with the dates according to, and it should be, and I agree 100% with Chazi that there are plenty of rabbis who are too scared to actually move forward. I don't think that's where the disagreement is. The disagreement is ultimately, I am guessing, but I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is. Chezi thinks that it's perfectly fine for Jews to build a temple right now on the, thank God. Whereas I look forward to a temple appearing from the sky, and I mean
What?
that.
Mhm.
As someone that's in the field, do you understand what kind of headache that? First of all, are the people that are under there at the time, are they being warned, or is it just falling on their head? Second of all, Wi-Fi, how I'm bringing in those things, it's gonna be very difficult. Just the construction
Okay,
of
so
that.
let me give you my idea. I think that it's going to be an UFO that comes and lands on the Temple Mount.
While I'm contemplating that, Craig, I wanted to mention to you about what you asked, and I'm going to give you an example. Going back to Adam, that in the second chapter of Genesis, God brings the animal forward to Adam and says, "Vayavoy Adam lirot ma yikralo." What will Adam call these animals? And God is giving us the authority and inviting us into a smaller version of creation as well. And the oral Torah is, as Rav Kook calls it, a coal, like a burning hot coal, which is we are part of the creation together with God. So there was Sinai, and then from then on there is our constantly, obviously within certain guidelines, working, re-understanding, reinterpreting, and trying to get to deeper levels of truth as we as humans progress and evolve. In some ways our capacity for understanding grows, and this is a separate conversation, Jake, with was like, are we standing on the backs of giants? Are we smaller? Do we have more? Is our toolkit larger, which allows us to understand more? And we have to also assume that God is revealing himself as we are. He's working with us as we're prepared, as we're ready to be revealed more. He could reveal more. This, and we don't have to get into this right now, but part of my conversation I want to have with Mark with regards to postmodernism is, while it has many issues, its breakdown of language and of certain terms allows us to get potentially closer to Kabbalah's understanding of Ein Sof and how all these terms really break down. So while it's very scary at certain points to realize that there might be a different way of looking at your religion, which shakes a foundation, and one needs to go about this very carefully. And again, I'm not promoting people do this willy-nilly, and I'm not going around schools telling them people should just like forget what the rabbi is saying. However, their rabbis do need to be identified who feel comfortable, like he just said about telling Jews, like the Rebbe told Jews to put on phylacteries. That was shaky ground. He made a move that he felt confident doing, and then seemingly the world came along with him. So you're always going to have that kind of change where there's a lot of pushback onto it. Some of that pushback is due to, I don't understand where you're getting this from. I feel like it's contradictory, which I think is totally fair and allowed. Some of this pushback is, we're not ready yet, or the generations are not ready yet, or we don't have the system in place to accommodate this. And back to the temple. I don't want people to building the temple right now. However, I do think that it's ultimately going to be coming from us, which is when we are unified enough to feel that we are called to do so, we will do so. We're not there. Politically, we're not there. Within the different Jewish sects, we're not there. So I don't think we're there. But I don't think it comes down from the sky. I think it comes down from the sky where we feel inspired to do so, and we feel the calling from God to do so.
And what the Rebbe points out is that it says in the Musaf prayers of Shalosh Regalim, Mipnei chatatenu galinu miartzenu, that because of our sins we were exiled from our lands. And so the only way to deal with the exile is not by dealing with the symptom, but by dealing with the problem, which is sin. And so until we are without sin, this whole idea of being out of galut without working on sin is completely incomprehensible.
But there's levels of exile. I'm with you that we are still in a spiritual exile. We are no longer in a physical exile. And if we're no longer in a physical exile, then it's up to us, like you just said, to move and upgrade, faith shift, to be in a place where we're not sinning. But I believe that happens with the recognition of that we are now, like, there. If you're looking for a modern day miracle, the 6-day war is what it looks like. Okay. Now I'm not coming saying that's miraculous or not, but if what am I supposed to hold to? You're saying no. Ignore the fact that all these nations completely wanted to obliterate us, but we won in biblical proportions. Instead, no. Focus on that we're still in exile, even though I'm here talking to you right now from Israel.
Uva letzion goel l'shavev pesha beyako. This is a very old discussion, and we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, we love you guys. We love each other. Don't take this personally. Mom and dad are just fighting, but like it's fine. We're gonna take you to school tomorrow. Okay.
Well,
Yeah. Listen, it's difficult stuff.
Craig, do you have a question?
well, I was going to say something that I think is actually obvious to everybody, but well, I'll do it anyway. In general, Jason and the group that we typically run with, the primary or the most plausibility engaging aspect or interpretation of the text is the allegorical one for us, I'd say. I think, Jason, you probably agree with that. So when you talk about heaven meeting earth, like a temple coming down from the sky, a kingdom coming down from the sky, you know, what I'm hearing is, you know, like something in the world of theory meeting actuality, and that's not, you know, that's its own kind of miracle. When something,
See, okay, this is the thing. Like I was talking, like Christianity, and this was during our Bible study. What I was saying to Mitch, like, so a lot of Christians, because of the types of things that Paul says in First Corinthians 9, have this idea that, like, oh, we'll get the spiritual lesson out of the Torah, and then the actual literal thing won't be a part of it. Whereas that's not the Jewish way of looking at it at all, right? I have all kinds of spiritual lessons that I get from the various commandments, but at the same time, that means literally, physically, actually the real thing. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a very different way of looking at it, which frankly I think the Christian way of looking at it is incomprehensible to me.
What I missed I missed a little bit of that. Are you saying the Christian way of looking at it is that it's just a spiritual like thing and
That
it's not?
you can have the spirit of the law without the letter of the law. The idea that there is a conflict between the spirit and the letter just is incomprehensible to me.
Well, yeah, I think I understand your objection because we've gotten to that a little bit before, but I don't think they were intentionally separated. I mean, I never took them to be separated. I just thought it meant that the spirit is what's within the law. Like it's the first form of whatever the law took on. Like when they build the temple, it's like it comes from a pattern. Moses gets it from a pattern. So it's like the pattern. It's a spiritual pattern that is an actualized on earth.
Look,
doesn't mean it's not literal.
Does
May I-
the circumcision of the heart include actually circumcising your kids or not?
Well,
May I
you don't.
may I interject a bit? Jordan Peterson talks about like the ideal, like whenever you have a goal, there's an ideal, and if you don't live up to that goal can technically kind of crush you, so to speak. When I look at least for me, my understanding of the law, I look at all of God and all of his holiness, and I'm crushed. I look at him in his full glory, there's no way for me to escalate up to that point. And it's not so much that that the law is wrong. The law is holy and good, but it's the fact that I'm in the flesh, I'm in sin, and to climb up at all would take grace, would take it would take something that holds me in that relationship to God constantly.
Well, I mean, that's what the Bible clearly says. You shall be holy because I am holy. It's not the other way around, right? And yeah, I mean, the fact that we don't meet up to God's standards should not be shocking. It's just a given. We're human beings, and He's God, and He's infinite, and we're finite, and that's just a given. And God understands that. God always understood that.
Like the whole spirit in the letter and the spirit thing reminds me of sometimes when you Jacob talk about the like the sacrifices, how after the Jews had to go into exile, they realized it was more about the spirit of the, like, God desires obedience in a humble, contrite heart rather than the calves. But not that those things, like you said, if the temple were actualized again, those sacrifices would begin again. But the spirit behind them is like where those came from, type thing. That's how I thought it was understood on both sides, both in Judaism and in Christianity. But I could be wrong on that.
There's actually an issue that's coming up in Christianity due to postmodernism, and that is you have battered wives who are staying in a relationship with their husbands because Jesus says turn the other cheek, so to speak. But the thing is, that's when Christ is saying that, he's saying that in a matter of grace, whereas the just thing for her to do is split, because she shouldn't be beaten up by her husband. And I see there's kind of like at least to me, there's a dance going on, but it's not quite. I don't think anyone lives up to the letter completely, but I also don't think anyone lives up to the spirit completely. We're kind of trying to, by the spirit, live according to the letter.
The whole dichotomy, I mean, it's like this whole spirit versus letter thing is just not a Jewish thing. Like, where do you get this dichotomy? Paul.
Yeah.
How did we get on this too? Did I miss something here? What was the original idea? Go ahead, Craig. Sorry.
It was the stupid thing that I said that I think I said this is obvious to everybody.
No, I don't think it was stupid. I just feel like we
Well,
were a little off course of it a little bit, but
it's hard to. It's interesting to me that you say, Jacob, that it's not Jewish at all. The distinction, the spirit letter thing. I wonder how you respond to. I mean, there's a problem with language in that language is entirely analogical. Like anytime, if I say I get your point, I grasp your meaning, everything I'm saying to communicate to you, I have to rely on analogy. So it's metaphorical intrinsically. So
yeah, it is. And so like the letter and the spirit are just intertwined in a way that's cannot be separated. And like the idea of just even separating them, it makes no sense to me.
Right. I agree with you. I would say the same. It seemed earlier like you were saying with respect to the kingdom coming down miraculously out of the sky, that it's
not the kingdom, the temple.
The temple.
The temple.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm thinking of an actual building.
Yes. So I wonder. This is something the Christians have a problem with too. How do you know when the right time, what the right level of because all language is metaphorical or poetic, let's say. How do you
No,
know?
this is the thing. This is the
Go
thing.
on.
Okay, in Judaism, we say that it's all of them at all times, always. And whereas, no, we are definitely listening to you, Sherry. We love you, and yes, it is incarnational. But so in Judaism, like we're saying, no, it's all of these things at all times. Whereas when you read the book of Hebrews, that theological crime scene, it very explicitly takes that which is it very explicitly takes that which is fundamental and explicit, and like tries to spirit it away and
Well,
be
you say,
like it's only analogies. It's like the temple not built by hands is going to be Jesus, right? And it's like, no, it's actually going to be a temple not built by hands.
No, I agree with you that I think it would be a temple, but wouldn't you also agree that God says he wants to dwell inside his people, and that all creation would be his temple, or
Yes,
to some point? So I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
It's kind
What's
of
the
both things, then,
contradiction
right?
here?
I don't think there is one. That's what I'm saying. I don't think there is.
No, but Christians, like Christianity, this is the whole thing. Like you're actually like go back and read like that theological crime scene and see what he's saying. He's
Well-
very much saying, "Oh, no, it's not the actual building."
well, maybe we're missing something here. If God says God is going to come and dwell in my heart, that's obviously allegorical or symbolic, but it's not also that he's going to come and as a material embodiment come and like dwell as a brick in my heart.
Craig, I want to Jacob. I want to just
Yes.
I want to mention that I don't know how you would pronounce his name in English. Korach.
Korah, they call it. Yeah.
Korah. Okay, so Korah goes to Moses, and part of the issue is earlier God was with the people. Vayamachanecha kadosh. All the people apparently were all in this holy level. So Korah comes and wants to know, like, if we did it, if it's in our heart already, why do I need all this? Like, why are you guys in charge? Why, like, because it's more than just having it embodied inside. Like Jacob's saying, like there are practices for these things, and these things have to be embodied physically. I would also say that, which is nice when you hear John Vervaeke talk about, the practice of embodiment, because clearly that is how these things transpire. They have to. It's more than just being in this mental state, even if it's a divine state. There has to be a practice to it. It has to back to what I was saying about Adam. God offers Adam to name the animals, but it's our part in doing that and actually making that happen. So I would have to say there is a difference there. I by the way, Jacob, I'm writing on my note just about the third temple, that the Ramban says that the third temple will be built together with the Gentiles. Just throwing it out there, right? So they would also have to.
Well, he's not saying with the Gentiles. He's saying it al yadei. Like he's saying the Gentiles are going to build it.
I got all the work I need.
Maybe there'll be like a Jewish-owned contractor team. It's complicated, but and one more thing, Jacob, just with regards, we were talking about like the spirit of the law, right? There have been Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg gives like four different revolutions in Torah, and one of them was the fact that we had the fact that there was an oral Torah, right? There's writing down the Torah. There's the old Torah. You weren't allowed to teach Torah for money, and that also changed. Then you weren't allowed to teach more Torah for money. You weren't allowed to teach Torah to women. Then you were allowed to teach Torah to women. And as far as your question, I believe now you also are allowed to teach Torah to Jews, and that's what you're doing.
Okay. You know what? You know what? Ginsburg is not somebody I would cite, and we can move on from there.
Right. Shots fired.
Because you have the
propositional types of knowing. I agree with you altogether.
Mm,
We had connection problems, but I think
Yeah.
we got a little connection problem.
yes. Ginsburg. There's a reason why he's no longer officially affiliated with Chabad. Let's just put it that way.
With what regard am I making a leap, Rabbi Melot? By the way, I'm just no pressure now, but at some point, Rabbi Melot, I think it's time to join. Doesn't have to be today. It can be privately, but we love you. It's a safe space. I keep on saying this. We're moving from the safe space to the brave space.
So okay, I have to take Chezi's point here. The halacha should be decided by poskim, but when you look at what actually happens on the ground, ultimately the poskim are overruled by the general people way too much, and unfortunately it's not so simple. I wish people would listen to the poskim more, but they don't, and because they don't, it's not so simple.
Even the line he writes over here, even the line the rabbi graciously writes over here about the halacha is not decided by you or me. Let the poskim handle those questions. Then it just gets obviously very hairy. What's a posek? How did he decide? What's his education? What does he know? Is he aware of psychology? Is he aware of Kabbalah? Because if a posek is giving me psak and has not done reading, where like if he doesn't have the toolkit to connect to Kabbalah, then am I just getting a certain source? And then that means, okay, so he says X and you say Y, and then we're back at that same issue we spoke about in the past, Jacob, which is rabbis potentially need to be offering multiple sources to someone and then guiding him through how to look by that. I understand that that's complicated. Just
Okay,
again,
we're
like,
getting really deep into the Jewish halachic.
right, guys. Let's talk more about Jesus.
If you say so.
Well, what I find interesting, what's your view on sort of the postmodernism sort of disintegration of words? And
I will say what I often say, which is when you start with 1 = 3, you will end up with 2 + 2 = 5. And I think that postmodernism is the inevitable result of all the theological errors of Christianity.
They have low blows here. Don't hold your pitches. Yeah.
Hey, this has been fun for me. It's really Jason's definitely gotta go. But
See you, Craig.
see ya.
Sherry needs to hop on here and take my place too. It's almost 2 a.m. here.
Yeah.
And I owe my wife a nice breakfast date, so I'm going to also be hitting on that. I would say,
okay.
just I'm ending this line to the rabbi. I am very aware that the halachic, the codification of the Torah, is a very sensitive web, and even if there's things that in theory could be changed, changing them have a lot of ramifications to them. And I am not, if anyone's watching this, I'm not promoting people doing what they want willy-nilly. I think it's still healthier to be part of the fold, even if that means you're doing certain things that you realize are not necessarily so sensical at the time. However, I would also say that anyone in the community should be pressing and pushing either to identify leaders, recalibrate leaders, discuss these things as leaders, because like the rabbi said, it's a slippery slope if one feels he could be more lenient. It's also a slippery slope if we end up turning our religion into something that's completely different and foreign to what God has intended for us. So that, I think, is very, very important. And Rabbi Melot, much love to you as well.
we'll keep on schmoozing.
Hezi, I got a quick question for you. Have you seen the Mathieu Peugeot video where
Which
he talks
one?
to
The one where he's chilling on the porch, or the one where he's stiff
then
talking to Jordan?
you've seen both of them then, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just reminded me what you're talking about, how he kind of gets at that idea of like, how do you Eve's ask the feminine asks the question, how do you incorporate the stranger, things like that. I don't know, but if you've already seen it, there you go.
I'll mention this. So his book, which I'm a very big fan of, and some of the things he says already show up in Jewish sources. Just the jargon is a little different. He does a beautiful job articulating himself. However, my nephew, who is 22 and is in one of his last years of his studies right now, he saw this book by me and he bought himself and he wanted to bring it into his school. And I was telling him, like, you got to be very careful with that, because these are ideas that I could very easily understand how. I'll take a different example. The first wave of Jordan Peterson, I was pushing onto my family constantly. The second wave of Jordan Peterson, I was pushing onto my certain siblings of mine and letting them know that don't let your kids see this, because the amount of conversation that Jordan has about Jesus, if you're not educated, could be very confusing to, let's say, my nephew, how he sees that. And that's not because I'm hiding from that. It's just because, like the rabbi is saying, there are very complicated things over here, and they could be misconstrued, definitely.
Yeah.
So like Mathieu Peugeot to me is someone that is a very big resource. However, it needs to be read within context.
Yeah, I understand. I haven't read his books, actually. I've only listened to that video. But yeah.
Peterson is just as confusing to Christians. So,
guys,
all right, well, I
Shabbat shalom.
gotta go too,
Peace and love.
guys.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Thanks for hosting this, Jacob.
My pleasure. I think I am actually going to
Just end it.
wind it down.
It's been so long. I said I would only hop on for like 10 minutes. My God. Kept staying for 3 hours.
It's been 3 hours. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all your
this-
fault, Jason. You keep on-
Apparently.
you're
This is-
such a horrible person.
This is fun, though. I like talking to you. It's always a good time. So,
And way past Rabbi Mullet's bedtime as well.
yeah.
Okay. Good night, dear
night.
Jason. Good night, everybody else. I am going
Good
to
night, Neverland. Good night, Neverland. See ya.